Chapter 1050. Seeing that Cheng Yaojia was so scared, Song Qingshu curiously looked at the staircase. He saw a group of big and burly people surrounding a middle-aged man and a young man walking up. The young man was Zhang Hongfan, who had previously taken liberties with Cheng Yaojia. No wonder she was so scared. However, what concerned Song Qingshu the most was the middle-aged man next to him. His eyes were like lightning, and his body emitted a murderous aura. He was obviously an expert among experts. Moreover, the dozen or so burly men behind them had a valiant temperament and fierce eyes. If he guessed correctly, they should be hard to deal with. The people who followed Zhang Hongfan that night could not be compared to them. Why did the loyal army come to Yangzhou? Song Qingshu's heart was filled with suspicions. He turned around and found Cheng Yaojia sitting there trembling. He couldn't help but gently pat Cheng Yaojia's small hand and comfort her. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Song Qingshu's words seemed to have a special magic power. Cheng Yaojia's panic finally calmed down. Only then did she realize that her hand was still being held by him. She was so scared that she quickly withdrew her hand. Looking at the shy appearance of the beautiful woman in front of him, Song Qingshu felt that it was really pleasing to the eye and relaxing his mind. There was suddenly such a group of people on the second floor. Yu Buchuan, Murong Fu, and Mu Gaofeng's forces all looked at each other with vigilance. This group of people had a lot of power. They were afraid that they were coming for them. After Zhang Hongfan went upstairs, he glanced around. When he saw Cheng Yaojia, his eyes lit up. Just as Song Qingshu sneered in his heart and was about to teach him a lesson, Zhang Hongfan pretended not to see Cheng Yaojia. His eyes fell on Yu Lingshan. "Oh, this little girl is really beautiful. What's your name?" As he spoke, he walked forward and put his hand on Yu Lingshan's shoulder. "Take your stinky hands off me." Lin Pingji was already suppressing his anger because of what happened earlier. Seeing this, he coldly said, "Oh, pretty boy. Is she your lover?" Zhang Hongfan rested her chin on her hand and clicked her tongue in wonder. "A man as handsome as you. If you didn't say anything, I would have thought that you were sisters." Lin Pingji's face immediately turned red. He hated it when people said that he looked like a woman. However, before he could react, Yu Lingshan had already slapped him in the face. "Don't you dare insult Xiao Linzi." Yu Lingshan had always been a straightforward person. How could she endure it when the other party insulted her sweetheart? "Bitch, how dare you hit me?" Zhang Hongfan touched the finger mark on his face and couldn't help but fly into a rage. He raised his hand and slapped her back. Fortunately, Ning Zhongze had already sensed that something was amiss. He pulled Yu Lingshan away and avoided a loud slap on her delicate face. Zhang Hongfan's palm hit nothing but air, and he was enraged. He waved his hands. "Go, capture the woman alive. Don't hurt her. These two beauties, chop the man up and feed him to the dogs. No, capture the man alive as well. This kid is even more handsome than the ladies. It would be a waste not to play with him." Hearing his vulgar and shameless words, the faces of all the women in the scene turned red. Song Qingshu also felt disgusted. He thought that this bastard's taste was too heavy. The eyes of the men behind Zhang Hongfan all lit up. They roared and rushed towards Ning Zhongze, his daughter, and Lin Pingji. The three of them were shocked and angry. They all pulled out their swords to defend themselves. Song Qingshu frowned after watching for a while. These people looked like ruffians on the surface, but they were all experts. This time, they were deliberately looking for trouble with the Huashan sect. Song Qingshu didn't know how the Huashan sect had provoked this group of fiends. Although Ning Zhongze's martial arts were not bad, there were too many people. In addition, he had to take care of Yu Lingshan and Lin Pingji. Yu Buchuan saw that his wife and daughter were in danger. He was shocked and angry. He rushed over and blocked with his hands and legs. In a few moves, he forced the opponent's attack away. Taking advantage of this gap, he hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "May I know who you are? Why are you looking for trouble with the Huashan sect?" Initially, he thought that by bringing up the name of the Huashan sect, the people of Jianghu would have to give him some face. After all, it was not a blood feud. Both sides would talk peacefully for a while. Those who needed to make amends would make amends, and those who needed to apologize would apologize. Who knew that the group of people in front of him wouldn't buy it? The middle-aged man who had been silent all this time coldly snorted, "You bullied my son. No matter what mountain you come from, it won't be of any use. Take him down first." Receiving the order, the group of people rushed over again. Yu Buchuan's heart trembled. He thought that these people were here for the Bishia's swordplay. He knew that today's matter couldn't be resolved peacefully. He first cursed the ancestors of the person who stole the swordplay. Then, he pulled out his long sword and fought with the group of people. Murong Fu originally wanted to help and take the opportunity to befriend the Huashan sect. However, after a few glances, he changed his mind. He didn't know where these people came from. Every one of them had frighteningly high martial arts. The father and son leading them hadn't even made a move. Just the dozen or so men under them were enough to force the 4 people of Huashan into a difficult situation, especially the 2 who looked like twin brothers. Not only were their martial arts extremely high, but they also cooperated very well. The dignified Huashan sect leader was actually forced into a disadvantageous position by the 2 of them. This group of people had mysterious identities and high martial arts. Murong Fu didn't dare to help Yu Buchuan. If he wasn't careful, he might even get himself into trouble. Song Qingshu's eyes flashed. He had heard that the 13 Grand Guardians of the Dabi Mountain's loyal army were all highly skilled in martial arts. Among them, the most famous were the 2 brothers, Li Haoyan and Li Jiannan. Not only were they highly skilled in martial arts, but they were also rare and fierce generals on the battlefield. Speaking of which, nearly half of the loyal army's territory had been conquered by these 2 brothers. I have to find a way to recruit these 2 brothers into the Golden Snake Battalion. Song Qingshu watched for a while and suddenly felt a desire to cherish these 2 brothers. Seeing that Murong Fu's attention was attracted, Mu Gaofeng winked at Mu Wanqing and said, "Let's go." The 2 hurriedly rushed out of the window. Who knew that Murong Fu was already prepared? Although he moved later, he arrived first. He unsheathed his long sword and directly blocked in front of the 2. If they continued to rush forward, they would only run into his sword. The 2 had no choice but to stop and brandish their weapons to attack Murong Fu. Song Qingshu secretly sighed. Murong Fu was indeed a top master in Jianghu. Unfortunately, his luck was bad. Every time he met a higher-level master, his constant failure constantly wore down his spirit, causing him to become more and more unbearable in the later stages. However, because of his appearance in this world, coupled with the secret manual of the 18 subduing dragon palms that he had previously given to him, his spirit had gradually recovered. Now, when dealing with Mu Gaofeng and Mu Wanqing, he could move freely and at ease. What a good young master he was. It was a pity that every woman on the 2nd floor had someone else's heart. His elegance could be said to have been wasted. Worried that Mu Wanqing would be injured, Song Qingshu quickly stood up and decided to start cleaning up the scene. Some attentive people must have noticed that the 2 brothers, Li Haoyan and Li Jiannan, who appeared in this chapter, were guest readers. Tomorrow is my book friend Li Haoyan's birthday. Because I'm worried that tomorrow's update time will be too late, I wish him a happy birthday here. At the same time, I envy him for having a good friend, Xian. He came to me a month in advance to discuss this matter. He said that he wanted to give you a surprise. Chapter 10:51. Song Qingshu slammed the table and said, "Damn it. If you want to fight, get out of here. Don't disturb my drinking mood." Hearing his sudden change, Cheng Yaojia couldn't help but laugh. She quietly stretched out her slender finger and pointed to the cup on the table, indicating that he was drinking tea and not wine. Song Qingshu's breath caught in his throat. He glared at her and thought, "I'll deal with you when I'm free." After being with him for so long, Cheng Yaojia gradually became less afraid of him. It was as if she could guess what he was thinking. She smiled and raised her chin, revealing her smooth and tender neck. Song Qingshu was admiring the beauty of the woman in front of him when he heard a man from the loyal army cursing loudly. "Who the F***CK do you think you are?" It turned out that Song Qingshu's slap had startled everyone. They stopped and turned their heads to look at him. Hearing his subordinates cursing, the middle-aged man cursed inwardly. His subordinate's cultivation was not high enough, So he didn't realize that his opponent's simple slap had shocked all the experts on the scene. He was very clear about how high his opponent's cultivation was. He was about to apologize when his expression suddenly changed, and he hastily reached out to pull his subordinate back. The people on the second floor only saw a blur before they heard a shrill scream. They looked toward the source of the sound and saw the man who had just spoken. His mouth was full of blood. A chopstick had been inserted from his chin and came out from under his nose, sewing his mouth shut. Song Qingshu calmly picked up his teacup and coldly said, "If it weren't for the fact that I don't like killing people, you'd be dead by now." The people on the scene were shocked. It turned out that in a split second, the opponent had attacked, injured someone, and then returned to his seat as if nothing had happened. But no one present had seen it clearly. Just who was this person? This was the question in everyone's mind. They didn't know whether the opponent was a friend or a foe. At this time, no one was in the mood to fight. The middle-aged leader of the loyalty army sealed the acupoints of his subordinate and helped him stop the bleeding. Then, he turned to Song Qingshu and said, "This subordinate of mine had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai and offended you. Now that he has received the punishment he deserves, let's forget about this matter and meet again." He knew very well that with such an unfathomable person by their side, it would be impossible for them to cause trouble for the Huashan sect. However, the Huashan sect could not always follow this person around, so there would be opportunities to strike. Yu Buchuan and the others had been at a disadvantage just now. Now that there was a glimmer of hope, how could they dare to stay behind? Unexpectedly, Song Qingshu said, "You can leave, but this person must stay." Seeing that he was pointing at his son, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He suppressed his anger and asked, "I don't know how my son has offended you, sir. I'm here to apologize on his behalf." Song Qingshu smiled and held Chung Yaojia's small hand. "Your son did not offend me, but he did offend my friend." Chung Yaojia was extremely embarrassed to be held by him in public. She wanted to pull her hand back, but he held it so tightly that she could not move. She wished that there was a hole in the ground to crawl into. The only good thing was that no one present knew her. If people knew that the young madam of Cloud Manor was like this with another man, she would be better off dead. The middle-aged man looked at his son with a puzzled expression. Zhang Hongfan, with an embarrassed expression, leaned over and roughly explained the whole story. After listening to his son, the middle-aged man wanted to slap him to death. His son was good in every way. He was smart and quick-witted, and he was also very talented in war. The only bad thing was that he was greedy and lustful, which had caused trouble several times. The first few times he could barely clean up his son's mess, but this time he had kicked such a hard iron plate. To be honest, he was not confident. However, this was his beloved son after all, so he had no choice but to bite the bullet and step forward to say, "My son has been dissolute and offended this little madam, but fortunately, this madam is safe and sound. Not a single hair on her body was hurt. Therefore, I hope that you will be magnanimous and not bicker with the child. When I go back, I will certainly prepare a generous gift to apologize and also to help this young madam calm down." Young madam is young madam. What young madam? Song Qingshu snorted with dissatisfaction. "I made a mistake, a slip of the tongue." The middle-aged man groaned inwardly. When he saw Chung Yaojia's delicate face, he subconsciously thought that she was still a young girl. But as soon as he opened his mouth, he noticed her hair bun and changed his words at the last minute to call her young madam. "Unfortunately, I don't care about your generous gift. Leave your son behind, and you can leave," Song Qingshu lightly said. In fact, whether it was from the perspective of the Golden Snake Battalion or the Jin Kingdom, he had no reason to be merciful to the Dabi Mountain Loyal Army. The reason why he was merciful was because they were also Han people. The middle-aged man was startled and angry. "What if I don't leave him behind?" "If you don't stay, then don't leave," Song Qingshu coldly said. "Your martial arts may not be invincible in the world. Do you really think we are easy to bully?" The middle-aged man was furious. He moved forward and a monstrous aura rose. "So it is the leader of the loyal army, Zhang Ro." Song Qingshu had some suspicions a moment ago, but he couldn't figure out why he would leave the headquarters and come to Yangzhou. so he was somewhat uncertain. Are you very confident in your martial arts? Song Qingshu didn't rush to attack. Instead, he opened his mouth and asked. Zhang Ro replied in a deep voice, I have fought dozens of battles and have never tasted defeat. Of course I am confident. Song Qingshu shook his head and said, Then I'm afraid you are going to lose. As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared from where he stood. Zhang Ro was shocked. After the previous lesson, he had already raised his guard to 120%. He didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, his opponent would appear in front of him. Fortunately, he had fought many battles and subconsciously protected his vital parts, which saved his life. In fact, his martial arts weren't that bad. It was just that Song Qingshu was too fast. He was so fast that he didn't even have time to display his skills before he was defeated. You can actually take one of my moves? Seeing his opponent vomit blood and retreat, Song Qingshu didn't continue to attack. Instead, he turned his head to look at the street in the distance and couldn't help but frown. He saw a group of Qing soldiers rushing over. It turned out that Yangzhou's magistrate, Wu Zhirong, had disappeared for no reason not long ago. The entire city of Yangzhou had been under martial law. When they heard that someone was making trouble here, the patrolling soldiers immediately rushed over. Boss, the Qing soldiers are here. Li Haoyan also noticed the situation outside and hurriedly reminded Zhang Ro. Where there is life, there is hope. Wait for us to gather our men and come back to save the young master. Li Jianan also tried to persuade him. Zhang Ro gritted his teeth. He was also an ambitious person. He made a prompt decision and said, Let's go. Song Qingshu frowned. He didn't want to attack in front of the Qing soldiers, so he let them leave. Father, wait for me. Zhang Hongfan was anxious and hurriedly ran out. Song Qingshu wasn't so polite to him. He picked up a chopstick and flicked it at Zhang Hongfan's leg. Zhang Hongfan cried out in pain and immediately fell flat on his face. He could only watch as his companion disappeared without a trace. Damn it, the monthly rankings can change at any moment. Not long ago, he was in the 15th position, but now he has fallen to the 18th position. He only has 200 or 300 more votes than the people behind him. The scene of him being overtaken by someone who had voted several thousand yuan at the last moment of the month before last was still vivid in his mind. Chapter 1052. Zhang Hongfan still wanted to struggle, but Song Qingshu's bodyguard had already put a knife on his neck. He immediately quieted down. What are you doing? Don't move. At this time, the Qing soldiers had already rushed up. The general at the front pulled out his knife and shouted at the people on the second floor. Whether it was the people from the Huashan sect, Murong Fu, or Mu Gaofeng, seeing that they were outnumbered and this was the territory of the Qing kingdom, they hesitated for a moment and did not act rashly. Of course, they were more afraid of Song Qingshu on the other side. They were worried that they would accidentally provoke such a difficult enemy. As for Song Qingshu, he was too lazy to pay attention to them. He signaled his bodyguard to negotiate with the general and went straight back to his seat. When the general saw that Song Qingshu was ignoring him, he was about to lose his temper when he suddenly saw what the bodyguard had given him. He couldn't help but change his attitude. He ran over with a flattering smile and said, I have eyes but failed to see. I didn't know you were here. If I offended you, please forgive me. Is there anything I can do for you? Although Song Qingshu was not an official of the Qing kingdom, the Jin kingdom and the Qing kingdom had always been brothers. In addition, he was sworn brothers with Song Go too. During this time, everyone in Yangzhou knew that the Jin kingdom had come to the Yangzhou kingdom. Even the inspector general and the administrative envoy wanted to curry favor with him, let alone a mere general. Song Qingshu didn't want to talk nonsense with him. He pointed at Yu Buqiuan and the others and said, These people are from the Huashan sect. Let them go. The Huashan sect was now in the territory of the Jin kingdom. As an official of the Jin kingdom, he naturally had no reason to make things difficult for them. When Song Qingshu pointed his finger at them, the members of the Huashan sect all trembled in fear. It was already difficult to deal with a single Manchurian soldier, and now there were so many Manchurian soldiers. If they really fought, the Huashan sect would most likely perish here today. But when he heard him say to let them go, Even someone as shrewd as Yu Buchuan was somewhat happy. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Your Excellency." Song Qingshu waved his hand and gestured for them to leave quickly. Yu Lingshan was straightforward. Seeing her father being ignored like this, she was about to say something but was stopped by her mother. Ning Zhongze already knew his daughter's personality, so he stopped her in advance and secretly shook his head to signal to her. Only then did Yu Lingshan recall the terrifying martial arts that the other party had just displayed. She couldn't help but stick out her tongue in fear, looking extremely cute. Song Qingshu smiled and thought, no wonder Ling Huchong loved her so much. She is indeed a lovely girl. It was just that he preferred someone with a gentle and feminine personality. Yu Lingshan's personality was really a little too polite. Seeing that Song Qingshu did not blame his daughter, Ning Zhongze could not help but nod his head slightly to show his gratitude. Song Qingshu returned the gesture with a smile and sighed inwardly. It's a pity that the Mount Hua goddess of the past met the wrong person and married a hypocrite. The son-in-law's temperament is also the same as her husband's. They are destined to have a miserable ending. After the Huashan sect left, Song Qingshu looked at Murong Fu and said, "This is the famous Gusu Prince Murong. Don't make things difficult for him. Let him go." After the Huashan sect left, Song Qingshu shifted his gaze to Murong Fu. He hesitated for a moment and said, "This is the famous Gusu Prince Murong. There is no need to make things difficult for him. Let him go." Although Murong Fu had been unkind several times before, he still owed him a favor. Although he had already repaid the favor, it was still not good to kill him. Moreover, there was no fundamental conflict of interest between the two of them. As for the enmity with Murong Bo, as the saying goes, every grievance has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. There was no need to blame it on him. Murong Fu heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. It must be known that the other party had only casually glanced at him, and the pressure he felt was unprecedented. If they really fought, he did not have much confidence in his revolving star passage technique. Many thanks. Murong Fu originally wanted to befriend him, but the oppressive feeling the man gave him was too strong. After hesitating for a moment, he gave up the idea of befriending him. Seeing the normally aloof Jianghu characters not even daring to breathe loudly, waiting for Song Qingshu to announce their fates, Cheng Yaojiao's beautiful eyes could not help but shine. After all, it was a woman's nature to worship the strong. Miss Cheng suddenly had an illusion that the man was a dazzling flame, and she was a silly moth. She clearly knew the danger, but she still couldn't help but want to get close to him. While she was in a daze, Song Qingshu suddenly said, "Wait." Murong Fu, who had just arrived at the staircase, couldn't help but stiffen when he heard this. He quickly circulated his internal qi, ready to fight to the death. Song Qingshu faintly smiled and said, "Prince Murong, you don't need to be so nervous. I just want to talk to you about one thing. Please speak." Murong Fu didn't dare to relax. Song Qingshu casually pointed in the direction of Mu Wanxing and Mu Gaofeng and said, "I want these two people. You don't have any objections, right?" "Of course, I don't have any objections," Murong Fu elegantly replied. He naturally knew that the man was implying that he shouldn't cause trouble for these two people in the future. Originally, he was only chasing after these two people because his aunt asked him to. Even if he failed, it wouldn't be a big deal. Murong Fu naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to offend this unfathomable expert for these two people. When Murong Fu went downstairs, he sneered again and again in his heart. "What do you want these two people? Why do you want that dead hunchback Mu Gaofeng? Isn't it because you like that beautiful girl? You have been trying to please her since the beginning. Do you think we are blind?" Sure enough, Murong Fu's thoughts were what everyone else was thinking. Miss Cheng looked disappointed, but Mu Wanxing was ashamed and angry. "You lecher." After saying that, she raised her hand to shoot Song Qingshu with the poisoned sleeve dart. Mu Gaofeng, who was next to her, hurriedly stopped her. Absolutely not. The miserable experience of Zhang Hongfan's group was still vivid in his mind. He didn't want the two of them to repeat the same mistake. But Mu Wanxing also knew that the gap between their martial arts was too big. Even if she shot the poison sleeve dart, she wouldn't be able to hurt him at all. She could only stomp her feet and sulk. "May I know why you asked us to stay?" Mu Gaofeng tried to squeeze out a smile, but unfortunately, it reflected on his ugly face. It was even uglier than crying. "I don't want you to stay. I want her to stay." Song Qingshu pointed at Mu Wanqing and said straightforwardly, "You can go now." As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of everyone present became strange. The vice general of the side thought, "My God, and I thought that these great figures were different from us. Aren't they all just going to rob beautiful women when they see them? I must become a higher official in the future so that I can have the opportunity to rob such a beautiful woman." Miss Cheng's face darkened. She directly lowered her head and stared blankly at the tea in the cup without saying anything. "You!" Mu Wanqing was so angry that her face turned pale. If it weren't for Mu Gaofeng blocking in front of her, she would have already rushed forward to fight him. Chapter 1053. Even Miss Chung looked up at him in surprise. She thought that although this person looked ugly and fierce, she didn't expect him to be such a loyal and righteous man. Song Qingshu chuckled, stood up, and walked toward the two of them. Because his performance was too shocking, Mu Gaofeng and Mu Wanqing subconsciously stepped back. When did Mu Gaofeng, the northern Ming camel, become such a righteous person? Song Qingshu said expressionlessly. Mu Gaofeng laughed and said, "Although I, Mu Gaofeng, am not a good person, I am not a coward who abandons his niece to escape alone." As soon as he finished speaking, he pushed Mu Wanqing outside. At the same time, he unsheathed his camel sword and attacked Song Qingshu. "Quickly leave!" Mu Gaofeng's roar came to an abrupt stop. He knew that with his martial arts, he couldn't beat his opponent. However, he could try to delay him for a while. Who knew that his sword would stab empty air? There was no trace of his opponent in front of him. Half of Mu Wanqing's body had jumped over the railing on the second floor. Who knew that in the next moment, she would hear a chuckle. "I still have a lot to say to Mississippi. Why are you in such a hurry to leave?" Mu Wanqing discovered that she was in the arms of the bearded man. She was so shocked that she immediately raised her sleeve, dart to shoot him. Who knew that the other party would press on an unknown place on her body? She had only raised her hand halfway when it fell limply down. "Let her go!" Mu Gaofeng roared and hastily waved his camel sword to attack. However, Song Qingshu pointed at his chest. Mu Gaofeng's entire body seemed to freeze. "One sun finger? Who is Duan Zhengchun to you?" Mu Gaofeng was shocked and angry at the same time. Song Qingshu smiled faintly and ignored him, turning around to leave with Mu Wanqing in his arms. "If you dare touch me again, my husband will definitely kill you." Mu Wanqing glared at him. "Your husband?" Song Qingshu subconsciously touched his nose. "May I know who Mrs. Husband is? I'm afraid that if I say it, it will scare you." Mu Wanqing deliberately said. "Oh." Song Qingshu could roughly guess what was going on. His mischievous heart was aroused, and he deliberately pretended to be curious. "Then I really want to see it." "My husband is the Golden Snake King, Song Qingshu," Mu Wanqing said in a rather prideful manner. Before they parted, he had asked her to tell him his name when she was in danger. However, when she ran into danger at Montois Villa, she did not bring up his name. Right now, she truly did not have any other choice. She could only try to save a hopeless situation and give a try. Song Qingshu. Upon hearing this name, the soldiers of the Qing kingdom took a few steps back as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Turned out the scene where Song Qingshu defeated 100,000 Qing troops, and how he was able to summon the wind and summon the rain at the end had been deliberately exaggerated by some people, and had long been spread to the point that it was almost like a miracle. Not to mention other places, but the Qing soldiers were deeply affected by it. Everybody's countenance changed when they heard about it. Song Qingshu also did not expect that the Qing soldiers next to him would have such a big reaction when they heard his name. However, when he saw Mu Wanqing's proud look, how could he bear to disappoint her? Could it be that Song Qingshu who defeated all the heroes in the world and finally won the title of the Golden Snake King? Song Qing-shu deliberately pretended to be shocked and also took a few steps back. Miss Chung was shocked. The two of them had been together for the past few days, and she had long been in admiration of his martial arts. She even felt that he was the most powerful expert she knew. Who knew that he would become like this when he heard his name? Could it be that Song Qing-shu was really so powerful? Mu Wanqing was also stunned. She originally just wanted to bring up Song Qing-shu's name to make the other party somewhat afraid. Who knew that the other party would have such an exaggerated reaction? After all, in her impression, although Song Qing-shu's martial arts were high, she was afraid that he was only on par with the person in front of her. The other party did not need to be so scared. Seeing the other party's puzzled face, Song Qing-shu also felt that his acting was too amateur. He coughed to cover up the embarrassment in his heart. Humph, you say that my husband is him. So he is him? Who knows if you were just casually pulling out a tiger's skin to scare me? Which girl would joke about this kind of thing? Mu Wanqing suddenly became anxious. I don't care. I'll take you back and interrogate you properly. Only then will I know if you are lying or not. Song Qing-shu was about to step forward when Mu Wanqing screamed, "Don't touch me." Seeing her panicked face and a trace of determination in her eyes, Song Qing-shu could not bear to let her be afraid again. He said softly, Okay, I won't touch you. But if a woman comes to help you, it's okay, right?" After that, he returned to his seat and said to Miss Chung, "I'll have to trouble you, madam." Miss Chung thought to herself, "You are here flirting with other people's young girls. Why did you drag me in?" However, seeing the other party's gentle eyes, she found that she could not refuse his request. She could only slightly pout her small mouth and walk to Mu Wanqing's side. "Miss, let me help you." Although Mu Wanqing had always been ruthless, she could not get angry with this woman who was gentle to the bone. She hesitated for a moment and then let her help her. Seeing that when Song Qing-shu went out, he brought a beautiful and dignified young woman with him. And when he came back, he also brought a beautiful and refined young girl with him. The guards at the Dao platform Yamen all sighed in admiration. They thought that this high-ranking official of the Jin Kingdom was really good at picking up women. After returning to the courtyard, Song Qing-shu had the guards throw Zhang Hongfan into the woodshed. He was much more polite to Mu Gaofeng. Originally, he did not have a good impression of this sinister and vicious hunchback in the original work, but when he stood up to protect Mu Wanqing at the inn, his opinion of him changed greatly. So, he quietly ordered his men to treat him well. Then Miss Chung was driven to the next room with a bitter expression. Then, Song Qing-shu carried Mu Wanqing into his room. "Quickly let go, you bastard. I will definitely kill you. Don't touch me." Mu Wanqing struggled with all her might until the door was closed, causing the guards in the courtyard to reveal a meaningful smile. After Miss Chung returned to her room, she sat down several times and stood up several times. Finally, she bit her lips as if she had made a great decision. She tiptoed to the wall and pricked up her ears to eavesdrop on what was being said next door. After Song Qing-shu closed the door, he gently placed Mu Wanqing on a chair and then sat next to her, gently looking at her. Although the other party did not continue to touch her body, Mu Wanqing secretly let out a sigh of relief. However, when the other party stared at her like this, she still felt her hair stand on end. "What are you looking at? Believe it or not, I will dig out your eyeballs." She was used to saying ruthless words. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized that the person in front of her was not someone she could casually teach a lesson to in Jianghu. "If my eyeballs are gone, won't you be the one who will suffer in the end?" Song Qing-shu said with a smile. What does it have to do with me that your eyeballs are gone?" Mu Wanqing always felt that the person in front of her was a bit strange. There was an indescribable strangeness and a sense of déjà vu. Of course it has something to do with me. "If my eyeballs are gone, won't you marry a blind husband?" Song Qing-shu could not bear to tease her anymore, so he returned to his original voice. "Who wants to marry you? I already have a husband." Mu Wanqing was halfway through her words when she suddenly revealed a look of disbelief. She stared at him blankly and said, "You are." Song Qing-shu took off his mask and revealed his original appearance. He looked at her gently. "Song Qing-shu." Mu Wanqing was instantly pleasantly surprised. She hurriedly reached out and pinched his face. Is it really you? Ouch, it hurts. Song Qingshu knew that she wanted to confirm whether he was wearing a mask or not. If it's not me, who is it? It's the real deal. Song Qingshu. After confirming his identity, Mu Wanqing suddenly threw herself into his arms and sobbed. You've been wrong during this period of time. Be good, don't cry. Song Qingshu patted her back and comforted her gently. Mu Wanqing suddenly sat up straight, raised her hand, and gave him a slap. Although Song Qingshu could dodge it, when he saw the tears in her eyes, his heart could not help but soften. He just sat there and let her slap him. Have you calmed down? Song Qingshu reached out to wipe the tears off her cheeks and asked gently. I hate you, Mu Wanqing said as she wiped her tears. It was like this last time, and it's the same this time. Is it fun to tease me? Song Qingshu pulled her into his arms and leaned close to her ear with a drooling face. He whispered, because you're really fun. Mu Wanqing could not help but feel her heart skip a beat. She could not help but think of the intimate times between them. Her face immediately turned red, and she said coquettishly, You're so annoying. Song Qingshu knew that her anger had mostly subsided, so he took the opportunity to change the topic and asked, Why are you with Mu Gaofeng, and why are you being chased by Mu Rongfu? It's all because I went to assassinate that woman from the Wang family. In the end, Montois Villa was heavily guarded, and I was accidentally captured. Fortunately, that woman from the Wang family was not around, and there was only a gentle and weak girl at home. She did not make things difficult for me, and she even wanted to secretly release me, but she was stopped by the nannies in the villa. Thus, I was locked up, and when that woman from the Wang family returned to the villa, she would deal with me. Later on, my uncle passed by Suzhou and learned that I was in danger, so he barged into Montois Villa to save me. Since he injured quite a lot of people from Montois Villa, he startled Mu Rongfu from Swallow Dock. To gain his aunt's favor, he volunteered to come and kill us. Mu Wanqing spoke about it in a very casual manner, but Song Qingshu's heart palpitated when he heard it. He knew that the woman from the Wang family Mu Wanqing spoke of was Madame Wang, Li Qingluo. Qin Homian had the worst relationship with her, so she often sent Mu Wanqing to assassinate her. As for that gentle and weak girl, she was naturally Li Qingluo's daughter, Wang Yuyan. He did not expect her to be so kind and so tolerant of people who came to seek revenge. However, what made Song Qingshu the most curious was the uncle she mentioned. He could not help but ask curiously, Isn't your father Duan Zhengchun? How did Mu Gaofeng become your uncle? Don't mention that person to me. When she heard the name Duan Zhengchun, Mu Wanqing immediately thought of some unpleasant things. After all, ever since she became acquainted with the people from the Duan family, nothing good had happened to her. After a while, she said faintly, Back then, my mother was abandoned by that person, and she returned home heartbroken. However, she was forced by her family to marry someone from the Mu family of Xixia to cover up this scandal. I feel that there are very few people who like the second episode of Nutrition Express on my public account today. Speaking of which, I really feel that the scenes in this movie are very similar to The Art of Disguise. Could it be that it's because this movie is quite old, and everyone has seen it before? Also, I hope that all the readers of this book can add my WeChat public account, Monk Lu Ru. Regardless of whether you're a genuine reader or a pirated reader, you're all welcome. Let me see just how many people are actually reading this book of mine and satisfy my little vanity. It'll also be convenient for me to go out and brag. Chapter 1054. The Mu Family of Xixia. Song Qingshu had a strange look on his face. Which Mu family? Don't tell me it's the Mu family of the Mu brothers, Mu Yuqi and Mu Wangrong? Mu Yuqi and Mu Wangrong's original names were Yili Yuqi and Yili Wangrong. However, these nomadic tribes were deeply influenced by the Han culture. It was popular among the aristocrats to give themselves Han names. The Yili family chose the surname Mu. Latest, the reason why Song Qingshu knew about these two brothers was that half of the power in Xixia was in the hands of the emperor, and the other half was in the hands of various tribal leaders. The Yili brothers were the most powerful tribal leaders. They directly and indirectly controlled almost half of the army in Xixia. Moreover, the current empress of Xixia was also from the Yili family. Song Qingshu studied the leaders of various countries, so he naturally paid special attention to them. You know them? Mu Wanqing was also surprised. Then, she said with an embarrassed expression, Mu Yuqi is my father. This time, it was Song Qingshu's turn to be surprised. Mu Yuqi is your father? As if she knew what he was thinking, Mu Wanqing could only explain, back then, Duan Zhengqian abandoned me. My mother was pregnant, and coupled with the family's elder brother's coercion, she had no choice but to marry Mu Yuqi. However, because my mother had just become pregnant with me, Mu Yuqi did not suspect anything. Instead, he took great care of us. But my mother still could not let go of that person. Every once in a while, she would take me to live in seclusion near Dali with the excuse of going out to relax. You probably know what happened after that. These secrets were really embarrassing, and they also involved her mother's scandal. If she did not love Song Qingshu very much, she would not have revealed anything. Song Qingshu thought, your identity is really complicated. You are the daughter of the king of Southern Defense and the daughter of the great general of Xixia. You can practically shoot a blockbuster about ethics in my previous life. What's the matter with that Mu Gaofeng? Song Qingshu continued to ask. Recently, something happened in the Xixia country. My father, Mu Yuqi, was in a hurry to look for me and my mother, so he sent his brother, Mu Gaofeng, to fetch us. He learned from my mother that I went to Gusa's city to carry out an assassination, so he followed me here. It was only then that he managed to rescue me from Montois Villa, Mu Wanqing answered. So that's how it is. Song Qingshu nodded secretly. No wonder Mu Gaofeng changed his attitude to protect her. It turned out that she was his niece. Brother Song, will you despise me because of this? One had to know that premarital pregnancy was a very serious matter in this world, and illegitimate children were even more looked down upon by the secular world. Moreover, her mother's actions were indeed not very kind. Not only did she let her father take over her, but she also couldn't forget her old lover. You are the great general's daughter and the princess of a prince's mansion. With such an identity, I don't know how many men want to be friends with you, but can't. Having you is equivalent to killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I can't wait to be happy, so how can I despise you? Song Qingshu hastily comforted her. Mu Wanqing was amused by his words and couldn't help but punch his chest with her pink fist. You're always so frivolous. After the two of them played around for a while, Mu Wanqing suddenly thought of something. Her complexion couldn't help but change. She snorted and said, what a good way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. During this time, I have been thinking about you all the time, but you were fooling around with other women here. How can you still remember me? Song Qingshu knew that she was talking about Chang Yaojia, so he hastily explained, you misunderstood me. She is already married. She is a young madam of Cloud Manor. It doesn't matter if you misunderstand me, but if this gets out and ruins her reputation, how can she face the eyes of the world? Because of her mother, Mu Wanqing was also quite sensitive to such matters. Hearing him say this, she felt extremely guilty in her heart. However, she was not stupid after all. She quickly thought of the intimacy the two of them had displayed in the inn and asked doubtfully, is that really the case? Then why is she always by your side? That's because her husband was captured by the Mongolians, so she asked me to help save him. Song Qingshu roughly told her the whole story. So that's how it is. That's really too pitiful. Mu Wanqing was cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. She was worried about Cheng Yaojia. Song Qingshu secretly let out a sigh of relief. He couldn't help but admire himself. Just now, he didn't say a single lie, but he was able to dissolve her jealousy. He really knew the essence of the 4 words, avoid the important and dwell on the trivial. 1. I feel that your pulse is chaotic and weak. I'm afraid it's because you are too tired. Why don't you take a good rest first? Song Qingshu touched her wrist and said with a pitiful expression. Mu Wanqing was originally fine, but after being reminded by him, she suddenly felt sleepy and couldn't help but yawn. I'm really sleepy now. Murong Fu has been chasing after me like a ghost. I haven't been able to get a good night's sleep. Yawning, Murong Fu has been chasing after me like a ghost. Song Qingshu frowned and said, he actually bullied my good one. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have let him go. Mu Wanqing smiled sweetly and said, well, he doesn't know the relationship between you and me. You can't blame him. Didn't I tell you to say my name when you were in danger? Murong Fu and I have a little friendship. For my sake, he shouldn't make things difficult for you. Song Qingshu couldn't help but scratch her nose. Mu Wanqing blushed and said, I'm a girl. How can I talk about men so often? Seeing her extremely shy appearance, Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh. But you still brought me up today. Speaking of this, Mu Wanqing was angry. She couldn't help but pinch his waist and said, you have no conscience and deliberately bullied me. I really can't do anything about it. Song Qingshu laughed and repeatedly begged for mercy. It took him a long time to coax her. Perhaps it was because she was too relieved to stay by her lover's side, but it didn't take long for Mu Wanqing to fall asleep in his arms. He knew that she had consumed too much energy during this period of time. If she didn't sleep for a few hours, she wouldn't wake up. He couldn't help but tenderly pick her up and put her on the bed. After covering her with a quilt and kissing her, Song Qingshu tiptoed out of the door. After closing the door, Song Qingshu's face suddenly became cold. He went straight to the next door and broke in without knocking. Ah! Miss Chung exclaimed and hurriedly took a few steps back. You. She didn't know if it was because she was afraid or because of something else, but she couldn't say the rest of her words. Song Qingshu closed the door and then silently walked to the table. He ignored her and slowly poured a cup of tea for himself. When Cheng Yaojia felt uneasy, he said, Madam, you can be considered half a Jianghu person. Don't tell me you don't know the principle of not listening to what you shouldn't? I didn't hear anything. Cheng Yaojia looked at the handsome man in front of her. She suddenly missed the rough and ferocious bearded man from before. Chapter 1055. You didn't hear anything? You didn't hear anything? Song Qingshu smiled noncommittally. We are all sensible people. Why do you need to deceive yourself and others? Miss Chung was also full of regret. She wondered why she went to eavesdrop and ended up hearing such an earth-shattering secret. Now she was inviting trouble for herself. I won't tell anyone else. Miss Chung hurriedly promised. Song Qingshu shook his head. He stood up and walked in front of her. I don't doubt your sincerity. However, people always change. When the time comes, I won't be there to monitor you. Who knows if you will choose to reveal my secret for other reasons. Miss Chung took 2 steps back and said in a panic, I won't. You have been very kind to me these past few days. I'm very grateful. How can I do anything that will let you down? Looking at her delicate face, Song Qingshu lightly asked, what if your husband wants you to say it? I won't say it either. Miss Chung was a bit hesitant at first, but her voice became more and more firm. Song Qingshu reached out and lifted a strand of hair from her ear. I can feel your sincerity at this moment. However, I'm a rational person. I won't put my future on a promise. Miss Cheng's face turned pale. Her body trembled as she said, I understand what you mean. I only ask you to remember your previous promise and help me save Lu Lang. Then she quietly closed her eyes. Seeing her delicate eyelashes tremble slightly, Song Qingshu smiled and said, What are you doing? Didn't you want to kill me to silence me? Do it, Miss Chung replied. However, her rapidly rising and falling chest showed that she was not as calm as she pretended to be. Song Qingshu couldn't help but smile. Who said I was going to kill you? Miss Ching opened her eyes and looked at him blankly. You're not going to kill me? Song Qingshu gently hooked Miss Cheng's chin and said with admiration, Madam is such a beautiful woman. Which man would be willing to hurt you? However, he quickly changed the topic. Of course, if I hadn't interacted with Madam before, even if I couldn't bear to part with her, I'm afraid I would have no choice but to destroy the flower. Although Cheng Yaojia was shy, she was a smart woman. When she heard this, she knew that the other party did not have any killing intent. She could not help but bite her lips and say, Thank you. Madam, don't be in a hurry to thank me. Although I won't kill you, in order to ensure that the secret is not leaked, I can only ask Madam to bear with it and stay by my side before I think of a foolproof plan. Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh at this moment. Why did he dislike killing so much? Just like the main characters in the fantasy novels in his previous life, they could resolve this kind of situation in the blink of an eye, but in the end, he still had such a headache. After thinking about it, Song Qingshu could only blame it on the fact that he was just an ordinary person in his previous life. He knew the psychology of ordinary people. He didn't want to be killed like an ant by nobles, privileged people, or some strong people. After coming to this world, he was no longer ordinary, but he also didn't want to lose his original heart and casually kill other ordinary people. Because Song Qingshu was absent-minded, Miss Chung had the opportunity to carefully look at the new appearance of the man in front of her. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was extraordinarily handsome and had a calm temperament from head to toe. As she looked at him, her face unconsciously blushed. He looked much better than before when he had a full beard. Song Qingshu finally came back to his senses and noticed that the other party was staring at him. He couldn't help but smile and stretch out his hand. Let me reintroduce myself. I am Song Qingshu. Looking at his outstretched hand, Miss Cheng's face turned red. What are you doing? Only now did Song Qingshu realize that this was not the world of his previous life. Shaking hands with a woman was considered indecent behavior. But he was a big-hearted person, so he naturally didn't care about these formalities. His expression didn't change as he said, "This is a handshake ceremony in my hometown. When two people just met each other, they would reach out and shake hands with each other to show their friendship." He was the perfect example of talking nonsense with a straight face. Miss Chung wondered where there was such an absurd custom, but she still subconsciously stretched out her hand to shake his. "Hello, I am Miss Chung." Hearing that she didn't mention her identity as the young madam of Cloud Manor, Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel moved. Their skin touched, and she felt the warmth of his palm. Miss Cheng's face turned even redder. She tried to pull her hand back several times, but found that she couldn't move. Suddenly thinking of something, Miss Chung exclaimed, "You are the Golden Snake King, Song Qingshu?" Song Qingshu raised his eyebrows and asked, "Madam, have you heard of me?" "More than heard of you." Miss Ching looked at him with a complicated expression. She suddenly wanted to say something, but hesitated. "Does the handshake ceremony in your hometown take so long?" "No, it's just that your hand is too young and slippery. I can't bear to let go for a while," Song Qingshu said without a blush or gasping for breath. But in the end, he still let go. Hearing him say such shameless words so confidently, Miss Ching suddenly had a familiar feeling. She felt that the man in front of her was still the same person who had always protected and comforted her. At the same time, he would also occasionally tease her. "Everyone in the world knows that you assassinated Kangxi. Later, you defeated the Qing Empire's 100,000-strong army. I don't know how many Han people applauded. Not long ago, you saved dozens of our great Song princesses. Now, the entire Song Empire regards you as a Han hero." Cheng Yaojia thought about how the elders in her family mentioned this name the most. Even her husband often praised him. If he knew that she was with the hero he admired, she didn't know if he would be envious. Miss Cheng's face suddenly turned red. She thought about how she and Song Qingshu were sleeping on the same bed. If Lu Lang found out, he would be angry to death. How could he envy her? What about Madam? What does Madam think of me? Song Qingshu sat on the edge of the bed and asked meaningfully. Miss Cheng's lips slightly parted. How could she dare to say what was in her heart? After thinking for a long time, she could only use a relatively euphemistic way to describe it. "In my heart, you are a very capable hero. It's just that you're a little rogue." Song Qingshu laughed and said, "Madam, you speak too lightly. I'm afraid that in your heart, I'm not just a simple rogue. I'm afraid I'm more like a pervert." Who would have thought that Miss Chung would slightly shake her head and say, "No. Although you are sometimes a little rogue, deep down you are a gentleman." She thought about how he had flirted with her from time to time these past few days, but in the end, he hadn't done anything to her. Even when she took the initiative to throw herself into his arms last night, he still scrupulously abided by etiquette. At most in the morning, when he woke up, he made a little move. "Is that so?" Song Qing-shu stretched out his hand, and Miss Chung was sucked into his arms. He held her waist and pressed her down on his lap. "But what if I don't want to be a gentleman?" Feeling his masculine aura at such a close distance, Miss Cheng's heart also pounded. She didn't dare to meet his eyes and subconsciously turned her head to the side. Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. "Only young master will remember what you promised me. As for the rest, you can do as you wish." Feeling the warm and plump body in his arms, Song Qing-shu's throat moved, and he moved his head closer. Seeing him getting closer and closer to her, Miss Cheng's heart beat faster, and her eyelashes gradually trembled. "Madam, your heart is beating so fast. What are you afraid of?" Their lips were only about an inch apart when Song Qing-shu suddenly stopped. Miss Chung bit her lips and said, You know what I'm afraid of." "I don't know." A smile floated on Song Qing-shu's lips. "Why don't you let me feel what my madam is afraid of?" Miss Cheng's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion. She wondered how she could feel it. But the next moment, the other person's hand reached into her clothes, and she immediately understood. This rogue. Miss Cheng's body slightly stiffened, but she didn't dodge. Looking at the cherry lips in front of him at such a close distance, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but directly kiss her. Miss Chung let out a soft cry, and her whole body suddenly collapsed in his arms. At first, her emotions were very complicated. She thought that she had let down her husband, but then she comforted herself that she was doing this to save him. Not long after being kissed by Song Qing-shu, she gradually became aroused. She couldn't help but close her eyes. Her body became softer and softer, and her skin became hotter and hotter. Feeling as if all the bones in the body of the beauty in his arms were melting, Song Qing-shu took advantage of the situation and put her on a bed. Then he pressed his whole body on top of her. "Marshal, Marshal!" At this time, there was suddenly a hurried knock on the door. Song Qing-shu sat up with a gloomy expression and asked in an unfriendly tone, "What's the matter?" Miss Chung also sobered up. She was so embarrassed that she directly turned around and began to button the buttons on her clothes in a hurry. Hearing the tone in the room, the guard's heart skipped a beat. He knew that he had probably ruined his boss's plans. But now that things had come to this, he could only brace himself and say, "The boy who was caught is shouting in the prison cell, saying that he wants to see you. If he wants to see this marshal, then just go and see him. Can't you handle this kind of small matter yourself?" If it weren't for Song Qing-shu's benevolence, he would have dragged this person out and beaten him dozens of times. But he said that his uncle is Zhang Jun. He said that when a marshal heard this name, he would definitely go and see him. The guard cursed in his heart. When he went back later, he would teach that boy a good lesson to relieve the hatred in his heart. "Zhang Jun." Song Qing-shu suddenly stood up and asked, "Did he really say that?" "Yes." "Okay, you can leave first. I will go and see him immediately." Song Qing-shu couldn't be careless because Zhang Jun was now the minister of the Southern Song Dynasty's right servant Shi and the assistant minister of the Secretariat. He was also commonly known as the right prime minister. His official position was even higher than Han Xingzhou's political affairs. Together with the left prime minister, they were the nominal central leaders of the Southern Song Dynasty. Thanks to the gifts from First Light of Dawn, Su Xinran, and other book friends, Fan Wenfang was now ranked 19th on the monthly votes list. It was too unexpected. According to the readers' reactions, Xiao Longnu had unexpectedly left out Fan Wenfang's name in the public account. Next time there was a chance, he would definitely make it up. Chapter 10:56. Zhang Jun, Yu Fei, Han Shizhong, and Lu Guangshi were one of the 4 great generals of the Southern Song Dynasty. But he wasn't a good person. He was one of the culprits who killed Yu Fei, and he was even made into a bronze statue in the Yu Temple. But that was in the future. Now, Zhang Jun was like the sun in the sky. After Yu Fei's death, Qin Hui, Ma Qifeng, and Zhang Jun took control of the central power of the Southern Song Dynasty. But they soon turned against each other because of the power struggle. In the end, Qin Hui won, and Ma Qifeng and Zhang Jun were demoted and expelled from the court. When Qin Hui was so powerful, even Zhao Go, the emperor of the Southern Song dynasty, was afraid of him. He even carried a dagger with him, in case Qin Hui tried to seize power. Fortunately, Qin Hui was too old to hold on any longer. Zhao Ryu, a member of the imperial clan, took the opportunity to unite a group of like-minded people to overthrow the Qin family. However, not long after Zhao Ryu became the minister of the left, he was impeached by Han Xingzhou's forces and forced out of office. The throne of the minister of the left was empty, and Han Xingzhou thought it would be his. But Shi Miyuan, Jia Shidao, and Zhao Ruyu's remaining forces blocked his way. The various powers fought fiercely, and the entire Southern Song court was in a terrible mess. In the end, in order to balance out the various powers, Zhao Go had no choice but to invite the previous prime minister's team back, and so Ma Qifeng and Zhang Jun became the left and right ministers again. Although all the forces weren't satisfied with this result, they could accept it. The court of the Southern Song dynasty gradually stabilized. Note, this history is 70% true and 30% false. It's only for the plot of this novel. Please don't take it as real history. Although people knew that Ma Qifeng and Zhang Jun were just a temporary group, they were still the left and right ministers of the court, and they had been the prime minister in the past. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse, so they shouldn't be underestimated. That was why Song Qingshu was so moved when he heard that Zhang Hongfan was Zhang Jun's nephew. After all, he couldn't imagine that the loyal army in the Debi Mountain had anything to do with Zhang Jun. What he didn't understand was why the loyal army would attack the Huashan sect. Zhang Jun was the prime minister of the court. Why would he have a grudge against the Huashan sect? There were too many doubts in his heart. In the end, Song Qingshu decided to find Zhang Hongfan and ask him about it. After making up his mind, Song Qingshu looked at Cheng Yaojiao apologetically. Madam, Cheng Yaojiao's heart was already extremely ashamed. How could she dare to turn her head to look at him? She could only lower her head and softly reply, "You go by yourself. Don't worry about me. Have a good rest, madam. I will be right back." Song Qingshu was also very depressed that she was interrupted at such a crucial moment. But now that she had important matters to attend to, she could only suffer for a while. Cheng Yaojiao was so embarrassed that she almost fainted. How was she supposed to answer him? Was she supposed to say, "Okay, I'll wait for you to come back"? She had already made up her mind that after he left, she would shut the door tightly. Song Qingshu didn't know what she was thinking. He put on Tang Kuo Bian's mask again and hurried out. He just wanted to finish questioning Zhang Hongfan as soon as possible. "Quickly let me go, or my father will lead the army to raze this place to the ground. My uncle is the dignified, right prime minister of the Southern Song dynasty. If you dare to touch a strand of my hair, then the great Song army will march north." Before Song Qingshu arrived, he heard Zhang Hongfan's ghostly wailing and wolf-like howling from the cell. He was already depressed because his good time had been interrupted. He kicked the door open and said, "What the hell are you screaming for?" When Zhang Hongfan saw his appearance clearly, his whole body suddenly quivered, and he immediately calmed down. It must be known that Song Qingshu's performance in the end was too terrifying. Seeing that he finally shut up, Song Qingshu said, "You wailed and howled for me to come. Now that I'm here, if you have anything to fart about, hurry up and say it." Zhang Hongfan cautiously said, "Sir, I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai and offended your friend. Get to the point." Song Qingshu rudely interrupted him. "Ugh." Zhang Hongfan's eyes revealed a trace of resentment. He was usually surrounded by people and could be considered a local tyrant in the Debi Mountains for hundreds of miles. Everyone he met on a daily basis would try to curry favor with him. Who would dare to speak to him like that? However, he knew that the situation was not in his favor and quickly hid his resentment. "Sir, it's like this. My father is the leader of the loyal army, and my uncle is the right prime minister of the Southern Song dynasty. If you could be magnanimous and let me go, we will definitely prepare a generous ransom for you. At the same time, my father and uncle will also owe you a favor. The reason why he dared to say this was that although the loyal army was nominally a rebel army of the Han people, they had never opposed the Jin Kingdom. Unlike the Red Coat Army, they had a good relationship with the Jin Kingdom and would not be put in a difficult position by the Jin officials because of their identity. At the same time, Zhang Jun was a well-known peacemaker in the Southern Song dynasty and had a good relationship with the Jin officials. Lastly, the Jin people were generally greedy, and it was common for captives to be ransomed in exchange for their freedom. Song Qingshu did not say anything. From Tang Kuo's standpoint, there was no reason to put him in a difficult position. In Song Qingshu's mind, the Mongolians were the #1 enemy. There was no need to clash with the Southern Song dynasty over such an insignificant person. It was a good choice to take advantage of this opportunity to extort money from them. Coincidentally, the Golden Snake Battalion was in need of soldiers' pay. It would be a waste not to take advantage of this fat meat that was delivered to his doorstep. Although he had an idea, Song Qingshu did not show it. Instead, he snorted coldly and said, "Just because you say Zhang Jun is your uncle, what proof do you have?" Zhang Hongfan was dumbfounded. He thought to himself, "How can I prove this? I can't call Zhang Jun here now, can I? Even if he wrote a letter to verify it, it would take too long for him to come and go. Since you don't have proof, then you must be deliberately deceiving me. How dare you? Come on, beat him until he speaks the truth." Song Qingshu sneered in his heart. This person had once conspired against Chang Yaojia. If he did not make him suffer, how could he be satisfied? What's more, in history, Zhang Hongfan was a Han, but he helped the Mongols destroy the Song dynasty. Fortunately, Song Qingshu came from the future, and there were still some legal principles left in his mind. He did not want to use something that had not happened to casually execute a person's life. At the same time, he also took into account the interests of all parties. Otherwise, Zhang Hongfan would not have died 10 times. Seeing that Song Qingshu was about to walk out of the door, Zhang Hongfan suddenly became anxious. He thought that if he left, wouldn't he be beaten to death? He quickly shouted, "Wait, I have a way to prove it." Song Qingshu was well aware of people's psychology. He did not stop and continued to walk out. This time, Zhang Hongfan really panicked. The secret that he had originally planned to use as a bargaining chip blurted out. "This time, we came to Yangzhou with Uncle's instructions to find Yu Fei's daughter. Thanks to the gifts from Shuyu 28001742 and the support of everyone's monthly votes. The monthly votes list still remained at 18. By the way, what do you think of the video of Xiao Long New posted on the official account? Anyway, I can't help but watch it. What a good director and cameraman." Chapter 1057. Yu Fei's daughter? Song Qingshu suddenly turned around and stared at him. "What's going on?" Seeing that he had successfully lured him back, Zhang Hongfan immediately became spirited. "Back then, Prime Minister Qin and my uncle were worried that there would be trouble in the future, so they decided to cut the weeds and kill his eldest son, Yu Yun, as well. At that time, Yu Fei's second wife, Madame Li, had given birth to a baby girl. Unfortunately, Madame Li was highly skilled in martial arts and fought her way out of the capital, disappearing without a trace with the baby girl. This matter was like a fishbone in my uncle's throat. He was worried that the baby girl would grow up to be a disaster, so he had been looking for her all these years. Until recently, my uncle received news that the baby girl had been adopted by Yu Buchuan of Mount Hua and changed her name to Yu Lingshan. Because Yu Fei had a great reputation among the people, and my uncle's identity was sensitive, it was not convenient for him to show himself, so he specifically asked us to do it. Zhang Hongfan had no qualms about telling these secrets, mainly because the people in front of him were all from the Jin Kingdom. One must know that Yu Fei was a hero of the Han people, but in the eyes of the Jin people, they wanted nothing more than to get rid of him. Both sides were on the same side, so Zhang Hongfan did not hold back. After hearing all this, Song Qingshu was dumbfounded. Yu Lingshan was Yu Fei's daughter? One must know that in his previous life, Song Qingshu had great respect for this daughter of the Yu family. It was said that when Yu Fei and his son died, Yu Yinping was only 13 years old. When she heard the news of her father and brother's death, she jumped into the well with Yinping in her arms. For thousands of years, many people shed silent tears and sighed. In his previous life, when he passed by Hangzhou, Song Qingshu had stopped by the well for a long time. Now that he had come to this world and had the opportunity to see Miss Yinping, how could he allow her to be hurt again? Song Qingshu immediately stood up, but soon revealed a puzzled expression. Although Yu Lingshan's surname was also Yu, everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Yu Buchuan and Ning Zhongze had a daughter. Could they have lied to the entire pugilistic world? When he thought about how Yu Buchuan and his wife did not have their own child in order to protect Yu Fei's only child, their loyalty was truly admirable. No. Song Qingshu suddenly thought of something. He stared at Zhang Hongfan and asked, "You said that when Lord Yu died, his wife, Lady Li, gave birth to a baby girl?" Yes. Zhang Hongfan did not understand why he would have such a big reaction. Moreover, why would a gold man like him address Yu Fei as Prince Yu? Song Qingshu stood up and looked at the distant sky. He thought to himself, No, Yu Fei was killed almost 20 years ago, and Yu Lingshan is only 16 or 17 years old. Could it be that Yu Buchuan deliberately made Yu Lingshan look younger? Confused, Song Qingshu suddenly thought of something. Wait a minute, if Zhang Ro and the others are here to kill Yu Fei's orphan, then aren't the people of Mount Hua in danger now? Even though he was suspicious of Yu Lingshan's identity, but Song Qingshu did not dare to take the risk. If Yu Lingshan was really that Miss Yinping, and he did not protect her well, then he would regret it for the rest of his life. Keep an eye on him. Song Qingshu instructed the guards and left in a hurry. Hey, can you let me go? Marshal. Zhang Hongfan shouted from behind, but Song Qingshu did not have the energy to pay attention to him. After leaving the prison, Song Qingshu instructed the guards. I'm going out to do something now. When Miss Mu wakes up, tell her that I'll be back in a while. Mu Gaofeng, take good care of her. Also, keep an eye on a madam in the room next to mine. Don't let her leave the courtyard. If she escapes, bring your heads to me. The guards' hearts trembled, and they all replied, Yes. You don't have to follow me. Song Qingshu went to the stable to pick out his mount, then hurriedly left for the city gates without stopping after saying those words. He found the guards at the city gates and asked in the direction that the people of Mount Hua had left. Song Qingshu galloped all the way. Fortunately, the people of Mount Hua didn't leave the city for too long. They're dragging their families, so their speed is definitely not as fast as my horse, White Knight. I hope I can catch up with them. Patting his mount, Song Qingshu could not help but think of Shui Shang. This horse was given to him by her when he was in the Golden Snake camp. She had helped the spirit back to her hometown, and he did not know how she was doing now. Galloping like this, Song Qingshu asked passersby along the way. Suddenly, he heard the sound of fighting coming from the bamboo forest in the distance. If it was not for the fact that Song Qingshu's cultivation was high enough, it would have been difficult for him to hear it. He took a picture of White Knight and signaled it to eat grass and rest. Song Qingshu quietly followed the sound. My Mount Hua sect has no enmity with you in the past. Why you keep forcing us? Hearing Yu Buchuan's surprised and angry voice, Song Qingshu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that he had finally caught up. With a tap of his foot, Song Qingshu carried a tall bamboo and hovered in the air, looking at the situation in the bamboo forest. He saw 18 people lined up in the bamboo forest. It was Zhang Ro and the others from the inn. They had surrounded the 4 people of Mount Hua in the center. Just now, it was Yu Buchuan who had angrily questioned them. Hearing Yu Buchuan's question, everyone laughed. Zhang Ro said in a clear voice, I heard that the boy surnamed Lin from the Fu Wei escort agency has joined the Mount Hua sect. I have always admired the Mount Hua sect's gentleman's sword. Mr. Yu's swordsmanship is unparalleled in the martial world. The Bixia swordplay is not worth your attention. We are nameless Jianghu pawns. May I be so bold as to ask Mr. Yu to lend us a look? The laughter of these 15 people went on and on. It was obvious that their internal energy was very high. Zhang Ro's voice was still loud and clear, not covered by the noise. It was obvious that this person's internal energy was more than a level higher than the rest. Song Qingshu frowned. Why was it because of the BCS swordplay? But then he understood. Yu Buchuan's reputation among the people was very high. Zhang Jun would not dare to kill his descendant in public. It was reasonable to find a reason to cover it up. The BCS swordplay was the most suitable reason. Yu Buchuan's clear voice rang out. You are all famous people in the martial world. How can you be so humble as nameless Jianghu pawns? I never lie. The BCS swordplay of the Lin family is not with us. When he said these words, he circulated the purple cloud divine art. Even with the loud laughter of more than a dozen people, nobody could not hear him clearly. He said it in an understated manner. It was no different than when he was talking normally. Zhang Ro listened and secretly nodded. She had heard that Mount Hua's purple sun divine art was extraordinary. Today, she saw that it really lived up to its reputation. At this time, one of his men said in a rough voice, You said that it is not with you. Where did it go? Yu Buchuan said, Why do you ask this question? The man said, The affairs of the world should be managed by the people of the world. Yu Buchuan laughed coldly and did not reply. The man said loudly, The one with the surname Yu, are you going to hand it over or not? Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. If you don't hand it over, we can only use force and search it ourselves. Yu Lingshan snorted. Just now, you were beaten to a pulp by that big bearded man in the inn. You even lost your son. Instead of thinking of a way to save him, you came here to find trouble with us. Is this what people call bullying the weak and fearing the strong? Ever since he knew that she might be Yu Fei's daughter, Song Qingshu had a good impression of her. Usually, he disliked her for not having a gentle and beautiful personality. But now he saw that she dared to love and hate. She was actually quite cute. You are the Yu family's young miss. Zhang Ro did not get angry. She looked at her playfully. Not bad. You are indeed a tiger girl. You have the demeanor of your father. The people of Mount Hua heard his nondescript description and did not understand. Only Song Qingshu knew that the your father he was talking about was Yu Fei and not Yu Buchuan. I don't deserve to be called a young miss. I am just a woman from the pugilistic world. Yu Lingshan did not know why he looked at her differently. She could not help but feel a little scared. She subconsciously took a few steps back. Lin Pingji took the opportunity to stand in front of her. What a woman from the pugilistic world. Zhang Ro smiled noncommittally. I might as well tell you clearly. Although my son is incompetent, he is clever. I think he will not be in any danger in the short term. However, the Bishia swordplay is something that can only be found by luck. After we get the swordplay, it will not be too late to save my son. Lin Pingji said angrily. I already told you, we don't have any BCS swordplay. Zhang Ro sneered. That may not be true. We will only know after we search. She waved her hand, and the people accompanying her got off their horses and rushed over. Yu Buchuan hurriedly shouted, Everyone, guard the door. Just as he finished speaking, a person stepped forward to block Zhang Ro's 8 subordinates, including the Li brothers. Previously, the inn's terrain was narrow, and Yu Buchuan was unable to use his martial arts. That was why he was blocked by the Li brothers. Now that the terrain was open, he waved his sword to guard the door. His strength was great, and his swordsmanship was refined. Even 1 against 8, he was not at a disadvantage. Ning Zhongze also unsheathed his sword and resisted the attacks of the 3 people. Yu Lingshan and Lin Pingji were fighting side by side with the 3 enemies. Zhang Ro was still riding on her horse and did not seem to have any intention of joining in. Although Lin Pingji's swordsmanship was high, his internal energy was still insufficient. In addition, the opponents were all using long weapons. His exquisite swordsmanship could not be used. Not long after, his right hand was injured by the enemy, and he could only use his left hand to wield his sword. The enemy had a long spear in his hand, and his spear technique was swift and agile. Lin Pingji used 3 stances of the pine welcoming the guest to block his attack. Unfortunately, the opponents had too many people. He could not help but lose sight of them. His right shoulder was hit. Yu Lingshan hurriedly thrust her sword twice and forced the enemy to take a step back. She called out, Little Lin, quickly go and bandage your wound. Lin Pingji said, "It's all right." After thrusting his sword, he staggered. The enemy let out a long laugh and swung his spear horizontally. With a slap, the spear hit Yulingshan's waist. Yulingshan let go of the sword in her right hand and squatted down in pain. Song Qingshu frowned. Just as he was about to make his move, he suddenly noticed that on the top of the bamboo forest, there was a graceful woman standing there. Although her face was covered by a light veil and her face could not be seen clearly, her feet were light and her fine black hair fluttered in the wind. There was no doubt that under the veil was an exceptional beauty. Chapter 1058. Song Qingshu couldn't help but be greatly surprised. Who exactly was this beautiful woman that suddenly appeared? She stood on top of the bamboo, as if she was weightless. Her qinggong was truly shocking. Even though he couldn't see her face, Song Qingshu was certain that he had never seen her before. After all, if he had seen someone with this kind of appearance in martial arts, he would definitely recognize her. At first, he even thought that it was the yellow-robed lady. However, this person was clearly older and had a well-rounded and graceful figure. Compared to the slender and tall yellow-robed lady, she looked much more enchanting. However, as she stood there, her entire body emitted a cold aura. Her entire temperament reached a perfect balance between enchanting and cold. I wonder why she's here. Could it be that she's here for Yulingshan as well? Seeing that the other party's gaze seemed to fall on Yulingshan, Song Qingshu couldn't help but frown. The situation below was becoming more and more clear. Mount Hua was, after all, at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. In addition, their opponents were all highly skilled in martial arts. Yulingshan and Lin Pingji were already under control. Not long after, Ning Zhongze and another enemy shouted in unison. Both of their legs were injured at the same time. The enemy retreated. Even though Madame Yu had one less enemy, her leg was still heavily injured. After a few more moves, her shoulder was hit by the back of an enemy's saber, and she fell to the ground. The two horse bandits laughed and sealed a few acupuncture points on her back. Song Qingshu saw that they were only hitting and sealing her acupuncture points. They didn't seem to have any intention of harming her. He hesitated for a moment and decided to wait and see. It was obvious that the mysterious lady had the same idea. 15 people surrounded Yu Buchuan. 8 of them stood in 8 different directions, fighting Yu Buchuan. The remaining 7 held Ning Zhongze and the others hostage while waiting for an opportunity to strike. The sect leader of Huashan may have a profound internal energy and excellent swordsmanship, but the 8 people he was fighting were all experts. In addition, he had to constantly be on guard against the other 7 people. He understood that today Huashan's sect had suffered a crushing defeat and would be completely annihilated in this bamboo forest. In his grief and indignation, he thought of taking his enemies down with him. The loyal army was confident of victory, so why would they be willing to fight him head-on? As time went by, the 8 enemies couldn't do anything to him. A bandit shouted, "Yu Buchuan, are you going to surrender?" Yu Buchuan said in a clear voice, "I would rather die than be humiliated. If you want to kill me, then kill me." The man said, "If you don't surrender, I'll chop off your wife's right arm first." As he spoke, he raised a thick-backed, thin-edged ghost-head knife. Under the sunlight, the blade of the knife emitted a faint blue light. He pointed the blade at Madame Yu's shoulder. Yu Buchuan hesitated for a moment. Are we going to let Junior's sister cut off her arm? But then he thought to himself, if I throw away my sword and surrender and suffer their humiliation, how can the reputation of Mount Hua, which has been built up for hundreds of years, be destroyed in my hands? Suddenly, he took a deep breath, and the purple aura on his face intensified. He swung his sword towards a man on the left. That man raised his saber to block, but who would have thought that Yu Buchuan's sword was imbued with the purple sun divine art? It was so powerful that the saber was actually forced back by the sword. The saber and the sword both chopped at his right arm, cutting it into 2 pieces. Blood splattered everywhere. The man screamed and fell to the ground. Yu Buchuan's first move was successful. With a chi sound, His sword pierced through the left leg of another man. That man cursed and retreated. His opponents had lost 2 people, but the situation did not slow down. With a pu sound, a chain hammer hit his back. Yu Buchuan attacked 3 times before he was able to repel the enemy. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The enemies cheered in unison. Old Yu is injured. He'll die of exhaustion. The 6 people fighting with him saw that victory was in their grasp, so they let go of the circle. This way, Yu Buchuan had no chance to take advantage of them. There were a total of 15 people in the loyal army. 3 of them were injured by Yu Buchuan and his wife. Only one of them had his arm cut off, and his injury was extremely serious. The other 2 had their legs injured, but they were not serious. As for their leader, Zhang Ro, she did not make a move from the beginning to the end. Yu Buchuan could hear that their accents were from both the north and the south, and their martial arts were even more diverse. It was clear that they were not from the same sect, but when they attacked and retreated, they seemed to have a deep understanding of each other. It was not a temporary gathering. What was their background? He really could not figure it out. The strangest thing was that among these 15 people, not one was a weakling. Based on his extensive knowledge and experience in Jianghu, he should not have been unable to recognize even one of these 15 martial art experts. Yet he could not figure out who they were. He was sure that these people had never fought with him before, so there was no enmity between them. Could it be that it was because of the Bai Xie swordplay that they had come to make things difficult for Huashan? His mind was pondering, but his hands did not stop. He used the Zi Xia Shangong, and the tip of his sword emitted a faint light. After 10 moves, another enemy's shoulder was hit, and the steel whip in his hand fell to the ground. Another horse bandit outside the circle rushed over and took his place. This person held a serrated saber. The weapon was heavy, and there was a curved hook at the head of the saber. He kept trying to grab Yu Buchuan's sword. Yu Buchuan's internal energy was abundant, and his spirit grew as he fought. Suddenly, his left palm struck the chest of one of the bandits. With a kala sound, 2 of his ribs were broken, and the man's iron cane fell to the ground. Unexpectedly, this person was extremely brave, and as soon as his ribs were broken, he felt a strange pain that pierced his heart. He landed on the ground and rolled forward, opening his arms and grabbing Yu Buchuan's left leg. Yu Buchuan was startled and brandished his sword to chop down on his back. 2 sabers came out from the side to block. Before Yu Buchuan's sword could chop down, he kicked the man's head with his right leg. That person was an expert in grappling, and his left arm extended out to grab Yu Buchuan's right leg. No matter how strong Yu Buchuan's martial arts were, he could not stand still and immediately fell down. In an instant, sabers, short spears, chain hammers, long swords, and all kinds of weapons were aimed at his head, throat, and other vital points. Yu Buchuan sighed and let go of his sword. He closed his eyes and waited for death. He felt the acupoints on his waist, his side, his throat, and his left breast were all sealed. Then 2 horse bandits pulled him up and pulled him up. Zhang Ro, who was on the horse, opened her mouth and said, "Gentleman Sword Mr. Yu's martial arts are outstanding. You really live up to your reputation. We combined the strength of 15 people to deal with you, but 4 or 5 of us were injured before we could capture you. Heh, I admire you, I admire you." Yu Buchuan sneered. "If you had attacked me, I would have been defeated long ago." Zhang Ro laughed. "We should not have used numbers to bully you. If I attacked again, and this news spread out, I would not have any face left in Jianghu." After a short pause, he continued, "Mr. Yu, we have no enmity with you. We only offended you tonight because we wanted to borrow the Bai Xie sword manual. This sword manual did not originally belong to your Huashan sect. You used all sorts of methods to recruit the young man from the Lin family from Fuwei escort agency. Naturally, you wanted this sword manual. This matter was not open and above board. When the people of Wulin heard this, they were all furious. I tried to persuade you, but you had better hand it over." Yu Buchuan was furious and said, "Since I have fallen into your hands, kill me if you want. Why are you talking nonsense? Everyone in Jianghu knows what kind of person I am. It is easy for you to kill me, but if you want to ruin my reputation, you must be dreaming." One of Zhang Rou's subordinates laughed and said loudly, "Isn't it easy to ruin your reputation? Your wife and daughter are both pretty. Why don't we split them up and take them as concubines? Haha, this way, Misty will become famous in Jianghu." The rest of the loyal soldiers also laughed, their laughter full of lust and evil, making Yu Buchuan tremble with anger. Song Qingshu subconsciously looked up at the mysterious woman in the distance and saw that she was also frowning. He thought to himself, "Let's wait and see what she wants first." Zhang Rou said, "Mr. Yu, perhaps you have already guessed some of our origins. We are not some righteous heroes of Jianghu. There is nothing we cannot do. Some of our brothers are lecherous by nature. If we offend your wife and daughter, it will not be a good thing for you." Yu Buchuan shouted, "Forget it, forget it. If you don't believe me, you can search our bodies and see if there is any by CS sword manual." One of the bandits laughed and said, "I advise you to hand it over yourself. If you search them one by one, it may not look good on your wife and daughter." Song Qingshu was puzzled. These people obviously came for Yu Fei's daughter. Why did they keep asking about the by CS sword manual? That's right, they must be using this as an excuse to conceal their true objective. Secondly, the loyal army must be coveting the specious swordplay that is widely known in Jianghu. He heard Lin Pingji shout loudly, "All this trouble started with me, Lin Pingji. Let me tell you, my Fujin Lin family does not have any by CS sword manual. Whether you believe me or not, it is up to you." As he said this, he picked up a steel cane that had fallen from the ground and struck it against his forehead with all his might. But the pressure points on his arms were sealed, so he did not have the strength to move. Although the staff hit his head, it only scratched his skin and did not bleed. But his intention was clear. He wanted to sacrifice his life to show that there was no sword manual in Huashan's hands. Song Qingshu nodded to himself. This Lin Pingji may look like a girl, but he is a strong man. It was not in vain that I valued him and taught him the Five Mountains divine sword. Zhang Rou laughed. "Young Master Lin, you are very loyal. We were friends with your dead father, but Yu Buchuan killed him and took your families by CS sword manual. We are here to avenge you. Your Shifu is a gentleman, but he is not a gentleman. Why don't you join our sect, and I guarantee you will be able to roam Jianghu with good kung fu." Lin Pingji shouted, "My parents were killed by Yu Songhai and Mu Gaofeng. What does that have to do with my Shifu? I am a Huashan disciple. How can I be afraid of death in the face of danger?" Zhang Rou's expression turned cold. "If that is the case, then don't blame us for being impolite. Search them." "Yes." The subordinates had been waiting for this for a long time. Their eyes lit up, they rubbed their palms, and reached for Ning Zhongzi and Yu Lingshan's clothes. Now that things had come to this, Song Qingshu could no longer sit idly by. Just as he was about to make a move, he suddenly heard a few screams coming from below. It turned out that each of those people had a dark green bamboo leaf stuck in their hands. Flying flowers and leaves can hurt people. Not only were the loyal army soldiers shocked, but even Song Qingshu was shocked. It seemed that this woman's kung fu was higher than he thought. "Who are you? Why are you hiding? What kind of hero are you?" Zhang Rou was furious and looked around. Chapter 1059. Song Qingshu, on the other hand, felt strange. He didn't see her clearly when she was standing there motionlessly. Now that she was floating in the air, her graceful figure was fully displayed in front of everyone. Compared to the pure and holy feeling of a real fairy, this woman's figure is too devilish. I feel like she's more like a seductive witch. Even though the woman in front of him was dressed in a white dress and looked exactly like a fairy in novels, Song Qingshu felt that her temperament was more seductive. Even Song Qingshu, who had seen so many beauties in the world, was a little dazed, not to mention the mounted gangsters from the loyal army who had been bored to death in the mountains every day. When they saw her voluptuous and alluring figure, their eyes lit up and they all had the same thought. This trip was really worth it. Not only were they able to enjoy Yu Buchuan's wife and daughter, but they also had such an exquisite beauty. Noticing everyone's obscene gazes, the mysterious woman's eyes turned cold. The moment she landed, she turned into a wisp of green smoke, and screams could be heard. In the blink of an eye, the mounted gangsters beside Ning Zhongze and his daughter were lying motionless on the ground. It was obvious that they were dead. Song Qingshu secretly clicked his tongue. It seemed like she was a rose with thorns. However, what surprised him even more was the qing gong that she had just displayed. It was obviously the water-treading subtle steps. He had seen Duan Yu use it before, so he recognized it. Could she be Li Qiushui? After thinking about it, the first person that popped into Song Qingshu's mind who knew the water-treading subtle steps and had such a high level of martial arts was Li Qiushui. However, he quickly dispelled this thought. Li Qiushui was very old now. Even if she had a technique to preserve her youth, there was still a limit. Furthermore, there were still scratches left by Tian Shan, Tong Lao on her face. Although the woman in front of him was not a young girl, it was unlikely that she was Li Qiushui. Zhang Ro was also shocked. She did not expect the opponent to be a woman. Moreover, she did not expect the opponent to attack without any hesitation. She could not help but be shocked and angry. Why are you so ruthless? The woman had just unsealed Yu Lingshan and the other two's acupoints. When she heard that, it was as if she had heard a funny joke. She sneered. You were just flaunting your prowess here. Don't you think it's funny now? Zhang Ro's face heated up. She also realized that what she had just said was nonsense. In Jianghu, the law of the jungle was very normal. She flew into a rage, out of humiliation, and pulled out her long saber. Attack together! This woman exuded a mysterious and dangerous aura. Zhang Ro was someone who had survived on the battlefield. Naturally, she wouldn't be as careless as she had been when dealing with Yu Buchuan's group. Seeing Zhang Ro's snow-like saber light, Yu Buchuan was secretly startled. Even in a one-on-one fight, he was not her opponent. No wonder she had been watching from the sidelines. Song Qingshu also secretly nodded. Zhang Ro's saber was impeccable in terms of strength, angle, and speed. At the same time, her entire body carried a fierce, murderous aura. Even if a Jianghu expert were to face her, they would be affected by her murderous aura and eventually become a ghost under her saber. Unfortunately, his luck wasn't very good today. First, he encountered Chun Shi, who was known for his speed, so he didn't have the time to display his martial arts. Now, he encountered the subtle, rippling steps that could be said to be the best in dodging in the Golden Book. His attacks were doomed to be futile. Sure enough, the mysterious woman's figure flashed and jumped out of Zhang Ro's attack range. She took the opportunity to attack her subordinates. Because her footwork was too exquisite, the two people who were originally following behind their leader, waiting for an opportunity to move. Who would have thought that the mysterious woman would suddenly pass Zhang Ro and appear between them? Two screams rang out. Zhang Ro had lost two more subordinates. Zhang Ro's eyes were almost red. The long saber in her hand was like a maggot in a tarsal bone, chasing after the mysterious woman. Unfortunately, the mysterious woman was able to narrowly avoid every attack. At the same time, she was able to take the opportunity to injure her subordinates. Just like that, not long after, there were only a few members of the loyal army who were still flaunting their prowess. Zhang Ro felt incomparably sullen. With their group's martial arts, even if they encountered the 5 uniques, they would still be able to fight. But the mysterious woman's movement technique was too amazing. From beginning to end, she was the only one attacking them. They couldn't even touch the corner of her clothes. How could they not be sullen? Stop, or I'll take you Buchuan's dog life. The Li brothers saw that the situation was not good. They hastily withdrew from the battle and placed their sabers on Yu Buchuan's neck. Senior brother, father, master, hearing the cries of Yu Lingshan and the others, the mysterious woman's figure flashed and jumped out of the battle. Release sect leader Yu, and I will let you live today. Zhang Ro inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the other side still had some misgivings. Otherwise, the loyal army would have been completely annihilated today. How could it be so easy? How Tian, Jinan, you take the injured brothers and leave first. While you're at it, take away the corpses of those who were sacrificed. I will cover the rear. Zhang Rou arrived at Yu Buchuan's side and grabbed him. At the same time, he placed a long saber on his neck. The mysterious woman's eyes narrowed. If sect leader Yu is injured, I will chase you to the ends of the earth. Song Qingshu became more and more curious. From her tone, it seemed that she had some kind of relationship with Yu Buchuan. But if Yu Buchuan had such a powerful backer, why would he be afraid of Zhuolang? Why would he work so hard to obtain the evil warding sword manual? Zhang Rou coldly snorted. However, he was indeed a bit afraid of the opponent's ghostly movements. He didn't dare to kill Yu Buchuan. After his subordinates had gone far away, he slapped Yu Buchuan's back. At the same time, he scattered some hidden weapons towards Yu Lingshan and the others. Taking advantage of the time when the mysterious woman intercepted the hidden weapons, he mounted his horse and galloped away. Throwing the intercepted hidden weapons on the ground, the mysterious woman looked in the direction Zhang Rou had left and coldly snorted. Washan's Yu Buchuan thanks you, madam, for saving my life. Yu Buchuan had the purple cloud divine art to protect his body. Although the palm just now was heavy, he was able to recover his breath for a while. He hurriedly went forward to thank his benefactor. In fact, Yu Buchuan couldn't tell whether the other party was a lady or a madam. However, looking at her temperament and attire, she looked more like a madam. The mysterious woman slightly nodded. Sect leader, you doesn't need to be so courteous. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you. Thank me for what? Yu Buchuan was confused. After filtering through his mind, he confirmed that he didn't know this person. The mysterious woman didn't answer. Instead, she turned to look at Yu Lingshan. Are you the Yu clans, young miss? Yu Lingshan didn't understand her meaning. She subconsciously replied, Thank you, senior. The mysterious woman suddenly frowned and muttered to herself. You don't look like me. You don't look like me. Don't look like what? Yu Lingshan asked blankly. The mysterious woman raised her head and looked at her. She smiled and asked, Little girl, how old are you this year? I'm 18 this year. Yu Lingshan didn't understand her meaning. She subconsciously looked at her mother. She didn't know why this person always said such strange things. 18? The mysterious woman's expression immediately turned cold. All right, you can leave now. Ning Zhongze and Yu Buchuan looked at each other in dismay. They didn't understand why her attitude had changed so much. However, this woman had an unapproachable look, so they didn't dare to say anything. They could only thank her again and again before hurriedly leaving with their daughter. After they left, the mysterious woman faintly sighed. Ani, after so many years, there's still no news of my sister's whereabouts. Will you blame me? Some readers reported that the monk didn't fulfill his promise to double his monthly votes. Later on, he deliberately reduced his chapters. In the end, the monk didn't reply to him. So in a fit of anger, he went to look for pirated versions. Ahem, I still have to explain here. 1. The lack of response should be from QQ. Previously, because I was sorting out the plot, I didn't really go on QQ. Everyone should be able to see that my QQ status has been in seclusion, so I didn't manage to deal with some messages in time. 2. As for the additional chapters, I remember that I still owe around 12 chapters of the promised additional chapters. This month, I started to feel that it's a little troublesome to say that I owe more chapters at the end of each chapter, so I didn't explain it chapter by chapter. Then I'll sort it out again. In the first part of this month, I updated 3 chapters every day, so I made up 9 chapters. In the last 10 days, excluding the days when the monthly votes were doubled, the remaining 2 chapters were 5,000 plus words. Every day, I added 1K words more than the previous 2 chapters of 4,000 plus words. No matter what, I still owe 3 chapters. 3. In the second half of last month, there was a period when I became 1 chapter a day. It wasn't that I deliberately reduced my updates. After all, the more I updated, the more royalties I would get. Who would say no to money? The main reason was that I was stuck in sorting out the plot. I had to reasonably soften the plot, so I spent a lot of time. No matter what, I can't just update for the sake of it. Chapter 1060. Aunt. Song Qingshu had a strange expression on his face. From the woman's tone, Yu Fei's wife seemed to be her aunt. It was a pity that he did not ask Zhang Hongfan earlier, and only knew that Yu Fei's wife's surname was Li. From her completely different attitude towards Yu Lingshan, it seemed to prove a certain judgment in her heart. Yu Lingshan was not the daughter of Yu Fei. Whether it was the loyal army or right Minister Zhang Rou, they all seemed to have been used by someone else. Surname Li? Li Qiushui's surname is also Li. Song Qingshu was puzzled. It couldn't be such a coincidence. Who? Song Qingshu was in a daze, and his aura was unavoidably abnormal. The mysterious woman immediately sensed it. At this point, there was no need for Song Qingshu to hide anymore. He jumped down and said, "I was just passing by and offended you. Please forgive me." Looking at the bearded man in front of her, who spoke in a genteel manner, the mysterious woman could not help but frown. "When did you come?" "I came down for a while," Song Qingshu replied. "Then you heard everything?" The mysterious woman's eyes flashed coldly. "I heard everything I should have heard. I didn't hear a single word I shouldn't have heard." Song Qingshu did not seem to see the murderous intent in her eyes and continued to speak leisurely. "Then you go die." The mysterious woman's voice suddenly turned cold, and she reached out her hand towards his chest. With a flash, she had already appeared in front of Song Qingshu. Just as her white, jade-like palm was about to press against his chest, she suddenly lost sight of him. This was no small matter. It must be known that she had used the exquisiteness of the wave-like subtle steps to play with the powerful loyal army in the palm of her hand. Now her sure-kill move had actually failed. "You and I have no enmity in the past. Why are you so ruthless?" Song Qingshu appeared 10 feet away, frowning as he spoke. "You can only blame yourself for knowing too much." The mysterious woman attacked again. She only thought it was an accident. After all, she was very confident in her martial arts, and even more confident in the wave-like subtle steps. In the past, Song Qingshu had always felt a little awkward when he saw Duan Yu using the subtle rippling steps. But now, when he saw the woman before him using it, he finally understood what it was. This woman was like a goddess in the water. Her posture was elegant, and every move she made could be described as beautiful as a painting. However, behind the elegance, her moves were covered with viciousness and ruthlessness. Song Qingshu was a knowledgeable man, and he had a general idea of the martial arts in the world. But this woman's wave-like martial arts, and he had never seen any of them before. Although they Fu, and Yu, Qingshu, the white, the wave-like Qingshu, were in Song, the sect Qingshu, they were and was he. Xiao Xiao, Yi was, and Xiao Wan Song. Yu, the woman, Yi, and anyone who knows about the Xiao Xiao sect will be killed without mercy. The woman's murderous aura grew stronger, and her attacks became even faster. As the saying goes, even a man made of clay has a temper. Song Qingshu had endured it many times, but the woman became even more aggressive. He couldn't help but get angry. "Since you won't tell me, I'll see for myself who you are." As soon as he finished speaking, his fingers moved to remove the veil on the woman's face. His lightness skill was now close to that of a ghost. With just one step, he appeared in front of the woman, and his fingertips even touched the lower hem of the veil. The woman didn't expect him to be so fast. He was so fast that she didn't even have time to use the wave-like subtle steps. She could only hurriedly fall back, and her soft waist bent at an exaggerated angle. Her whole body was so soft that it seemed as if her bones were broken in the middle. Only then did she narrowly avoid his fingers. Song Qingshu couldn't help but whistle like those hooligans in his previous life when he saw her amazing flexibility and her unusually full breasts. "Wow, what a good body," he said. As her body fell back, the woman raised the tip of her foot high and kicked his hand away. As soon as she got up, she heard his frivolous whistle and couldn't help but blush. "Lecher." After saying that, she attacked again. However, after seeing the martial arts that Song Qingshu had just displayed, she became more cautious than before. She always reserved 30% of her strength when she attacked, just in case. Song Qingshu also couldn't act as freely as before. After all, this woman's martial arts were extremely high. Other than Dongfang Muxue, no woman he knew could compare to her. Coupled with the wave-like subtle steps and her magical and exquisite martial arts, the two of them exchanged dozens of moves in an instant. The more the woman fought, the more shocked she became. Her martial arts were already very high, and coupled with the wave-like subtle steps, she could easily win even if she encountered an expert of the same level, who knew that this bearded man in front of her not only had high martial arts, but his lightness skill also seemed to be slightly above hers. At this moment, if there were outsiders observing from the side, they would probably be so shocked that their eyeballs would fall out. The woman used the wave-like, subtle steps to the extreme. Her whole body turned into a light white smoke, and her afterimages were everywhere. It was dazzling to look at, and no one could tell which one was her real body. Song Qingshu's movement technique was of a different style. He would often suddenly disappear in a certain place, and in the next moment, appear out of thin air in another impossible place. Just like that, the two figures, one white and one white, intertwined with each other. After another dozen moves, the two figures suddenly separated. Your martial arts are only SOSO. Although the woman was shocked, she still maintained a calm expression. Song Qingshu didn't say anything and only waved the white silk scarf in his hand proudly. The woman's beautiful face instantly turned pale. She quickly reached out to touch her face, but the veil covering her face had already disappeared. Fairy sister, Song Qingshu blurted out when he saw the appearance of the woman in front of him. Back then, when he was trying to find a world martial arts treasury, he had made a trip to the Infinite Jade Cave in Dali. There, he'd seen a beautiful jade statue, and the woman in front of him actually looked similar to the jade statue. No, there seems to be something different. Song Qingshu shook his head. The jade statue was 18 or 19 years old, but the woman in front of him was in her 30s. The jade statue was beautiful and lively, but the woman in front of him was cold and elegant with a hint of enchanting. What's your relationship with Wang Yuyan? Song Qingshu suddenly felt that the woman in front of him was more similar to Wang Yuyan than the jade statue. You know Yuyan? The mysterious woman was stunned, but she quickly came to her senses. She shut her mouth and didn't say another word. As expected, it's related to Wang Yuyan. I just don't know who she is. Song Qingshu had a few guesses in his heart, but he quickly rejected them all. Just who are you? The mysterious woman clearly had the same doubts as him. Song Qingshu was just about to answer when suddenly there was a flash in front of him. A thick cloud of smoke rose up near her. When the smoke dissipated, the mysterious woman's figure was nowhere to be seen. I was actually made a fool of. Song Qingshu stood where he was, feeling extremely depressed. Thanks to the gifts from the gentle and domineering Baidu and other book friends, I'm currently ranked 17th on the monthly rankings. I hope this advantage can be maintained until the end of the month, and I'll eventually remain in the top 20. Chapter 1061. Even after returning to the Dao platform Yamen, Song Qingshu was still depressed about this matter. He had let her escape so easily. After all, this person was related to the secret of Yu Fei's daughter. At the same time, she was related to the Carefree faction and Wang Yuyan. She was a very important person. However, Song Qingshu quickly felt relieved. She was a top martial artist, and her lightness skills were not much worse than his. It would not be easy for him to catch her. You're already someone's wife. Why do you still stay by my husband's side? I don't need to explain anything to you, do I? At this time, the sound of quarreling in the garden roused Song Qingshu from his contemplation. He hastily ran over and saw Mu Wanqing glaring at Cheng Yaojia with an unfriendly expression. Cheng Yaojia's face was completely red. She was obviously ashamed and angry. Why don't you need to explain to me? You are clearly seducing my husband. Can I ask about it? Mu Wanqing was a very emotional person. She wholeheartedly wanted her sweetheart to treat her wholeheartedly. Zhou Zhuo and the others had an engagement with him first, but Cheng Yaojia was a married woman. How could she bear it? Miss Cheng was originally in her room, feeling sorry for herself, when Mu Wanqing suddenly barged in and questioned her with an unkind tone. Although her temperament was gentle and shy, she was not made of mud. In addition, she had been worried about her husband's matter recently, so she could not help but retaliate. "Miss, you keep calling him Song Lang. It sounds nice, but I don't know if Miss is his wife or if you're engaged to him." Miss Chang's words hit Mu Wanqing's soft spot. She was originally very sensitive about this matter. Being provoked by the other party, she immediately exploded. Song Qingshu felt a headache coming on. How did he come back just in time to run into Azura? He was about to turn around and leave when he was discovered by the two women. "Song Qingshu, what is the relationship between you and this woman?" Mu Wanqing ran over and pulled aback. Her tone was full of grievance and anger. Song Qingshu felt embarrassed and subconsciously replied, "She is the young madam of Cloud Manor. What relationship can she have with me?" Although Cheng Yaojia didn't have any expectations in her heart, when she heard what he said, her expression became gloomy. She turned her head away, tightly pursed her lips, and didn't say anything. Song Qingshu also felt that he was being a little unkind. A few hours ago, the two of them had already progressed to the point of rolling in the sheets. Even though they hadn't taken the final step, they had already done everything that should and shouldn't have been done. Saying this now made it seem as if he had pulled up his pants and was ignoring him. "Since she has nothing to do with you, why do you keep her by your side? You're a man and a woman living alone next door. Aren't you afraid of rumors?" Mu Wanqing had roughly guessed something from their gazes, and her expression became even more miserable. "Well, she has no relatives now and is in urgent need of help. The Mongolians are eyeing the southern Song dynasty's diplomatic corps. If we drive her out now, won't we be pushing her into a fire pit?" Song Qingshu said with a wry smile. When Cheng Yaojia heard that he still remembered to speak up for her, her mood finally improved. "I don't care. You clearly can't bear to part with her." Seeing the two of them exchanging glances, Mu Wanqing was so angry that she stomped her feet. The more she thought about it, the more wronged she felt. Song Qingshu also felt a headache coming on. As the saying goes, even an upright official would find it difficult to resolve family disputes. No matter how high his martial arts skills were, he could only watch helplessly when the harem was on fire. Just when he didn't know what to do, a guard suddenly came in from outside and reporting, according to the spy arranged near the Jade Pure Monastery, Li Kashio is heading there. Then I have to go and see immediately." Song Qingshu's face was solemn. He then said to the two women, "We'll talk about your matters when I come back. I'll go and take care of business first." After saying that, he didn't wait for them to answer and hurriedly walked out. As soon as Song Qingshu left, Mu Wanqing suddenly felt that it was meaningless to continue quarreling. She could only snort and arrogantly turn around to leave. Although Cheng Yaojia was depressed, she was in the wrong first, so she could only close the door and sulk. After leaving the Dao Tai Yamen, Song Qingshu let out a long sigh and immediately said to the guard, "In a moment, go and collect 100 taels of silver. This marshal will reward you." The guard looked inexplicable. He didn't seem to have made any contributions. However, how could he not be happy with the reward? He hurriedly replied, "Thank you, Marshal." Song Qingshu nodded slightly. He wondered if he should take the initiative to find a few clever subordinates to come out and save the situation when they see that his harem is on fire. Along the way to the vicinity of the Jade Pure Monastery, Song Qingshu refused the guard's request to follow him. He found a secluded corner and secretly snuck into the Jade Pure Monastery. He easily found his way to Wang Baobao's room. Because this matter was confidential, he didn't have many experts here. The experts were all deployed on the periphery. There was no problem with this kind of arrangement, and it was in line with the art of war. It was a pity that Wang Baobao didn't expect that there would be people in this world with such high lightness skills that they could quietly break through the layers of defense without being discovered. "Admiral, have you considered what this prince said just now?" Song Qingshu hid on the beam of the corridor outside. Soon, Wang Baobao's voice came from the room. Then Li Kashio's bitter smile was heard. "Young prince, it's not that I don't believe in Mongolia's strength, but your country is not connected to Jianghuai. If something really happens, I'm afraid that even if I want to save you, it will be too far away. Wang Baobao chuckled. This prince knows what admiral means. I'm afraid that in your heart, after betraying Qing, the only country that is connected to Jianghuai and has enough power to protect you is the Southern Song. However, this prince has to remind Admiral that the Southern Song is famous for being weak in the wars between countries. Take this time, for example. The dignified Southern Song's diplomatic mission can't even protect themselves. Can you hope that they will have the ability to protect you in the future? Li Keqiu's tone clearly softened. Song Qingshu listened for a while longer. He couldn't help but admire the old fox Li Keqiu. She was really watertight. On the surface, she went along with Wang Baobao's words, but she didn't make any substantive promises. This move was flawless. Wang Baobao wasn't stupid and quickly noticed the other party's slipperiness. He couldn't help but snort. This prince won't force you. Admiral can go back and think about it carefully. Think about it carefully before replying to this prince. Thank you, young prince. Li Keqiu cupped her hands. Wang Baobao suddenly said, Admiral, don't think about it too long. After all, this prince's patience is notoriously bad. Li Keqiu's heart trembled. She hurriedly smiled and said, Of course. Watching Li Keqiu leave, Song Qingshu thought it was about time to get in touch with her. He stayed on the beam for a while, but didn't hear any more useful information. He quietly left to find the whereabouts of Lu Guaning and the others. After all, he had taken advantage of Cheng Yaojia before. He would feel bad if he didn't do something for her. After a round of investigation, it was found that the Southern Song Diplomatic Corps were all guarded individually, and the one guarding Han Xingzhou was the most heavily guarded. Given Song Qingshu's current level of martial arts, it was impossible for him to rescue Han Xingzhou without alerting others. Of course, Song Qingshu wouldn't do such a strenuous and unrewarding thing. He quickly continued to investigate and found Lu Guaning's cell. It seems that Lu Guaning's position in the diplomatic mission is really not that high. The reason why Song Qingshu sighed was that there were only 2 ordinary foreign monks guarding Lu Guaning. He had a deep impression of the foreign monks under Wang Baobao. After all, he had almost suffered a great loss under their unique joint force technique that night. However, these 2 foreign monks were not part of Wang Baobao's 18 guardian deities, so their martial arts were only sloppy and ordinary. As his figure flashed past the 2, Song Qingshu sealed their acupoints so that they looked no different from normal. Then he took out the keys from their waists and opened the door. He stared at Lu Guaning, who was chained by steel chains, with a faint smile. At this moment, he was covered in blood and his hair was disheveled. He was hung on a wooden frame. It was obvious that he had been tortured by the Mongolians. He didn't look like the usual high-spirited young master of Cloud Manor. You Mongolian dogs, just give up. I won't tell you anything. Lu Guaning didn't raise his head to look. He just muttered, Although I admire your hard bones, I have to say that you are a bit too stupid. Song Qingshu shook his head. Lu Guaning raised his head in surprise. When he saw his appearance, he couldn't help but angrily say, It's you, you dog thief. Hey, I don't like what you said. Speaking of which, I let you live. How can you repay kindness with enmity? Song Qingshu was speechless. Hey! Lu Guaning spat out a mouthful of blood and stared at him with bloodshot eyes. You bullied Yaojia. Do you want me to be grateful? Which eye of yours saw me bully her? Song Qingshu suddenly felt guilty. He couldn't help but think of how he pressed Cheng Yaojia down on the bed and groped her. Fine, I bullied her. You can't even protect yourself now. Don't tell me you want revenge. You. Lu Guaning wanted to pounce, but unfortunately, his body was tightly chained. All right, let's get back to business. This time, I was entrusted by your wife to save you. Song Qingshu waved his hand, indicating for him to calm down. Save me? Hearing this news, Lu Guaning was not happy at all. After all, he was not related to the other party. The other party came to save him because of his wife. But why did the other party agree to save him? The answer was self-evident. Taking advantage of others when they are down. Despicable. Lu Guaning's face was ashen. He felt that the scene in front of him was somewhat green. Song Qing-shu ignored him and said, "But don't be happy too early. Right now, there are many experts in Clear Jade Monastery. I won't be able to save you in a short time. However, I can help you pass a message to your wife. If you have something to say it quickly." "I don't need it," Lu Guanyin coldly replied. Song Qing-shu faintly smiled. "I know you want to kill me right now. However, I have to remind you that with your current situation, you might be killed by the Mongolians tomorrow. This might be the last thing you say to your wife. If you miss this opportunity, you won't get another one." "Fine, but I don't believe you. Give me a pen and paper. I will write it myself," Lu Guanyin coldly said. "Where can I find a pen and paper for you at this time?" Song Qing-shu frowned and suddenly thought of something. He took out a handkerchief from his bosom and gave it to him. "You can write on this." Chapter 1062. The noise was still some distance away from the prison. Song Qing-shu could only vaguely hear it. Lu Guanyin had no idea what was going on. The White Lotus Society? Song Qing-shu's heart trembled. He didn't know why the White Lotus Society would come looking for trouble with the Mongolians. Could it be that they mistakenly thought that the people in the Clear Jade Monastery were the Southern Song Dynasty's ambassadors? The more Song Qing-shu thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. After Wang Baobao took control of the Clear Jade Monastery, he immediately blocked the news from spreading. At the same time, he made it seem as if nothing had happened. It was not surprising that the White Lotus Society didn't know about the changes. "I wonder if Zhiruo is here." Thinking about the experts under Wang Baobao, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but worry. While Song Qing-shu was deep in thought, Lu Guanyin stared at the embroidered handkerchief in his hand and trembled. How could he not recognize the handkerchief that his wife had specially embroidered for him? This was like a token of love. His wife had always carried it with her. Now it was in the hands of the man in front of him. It was obvious what had happened between them. "Why is this thing with you?" Although Lu Guanyin had guessed most of it, he still held on to a glimmer of hope that he would get a different answer from the other person. Noticing the other person's intense reaction, Song Qing-shu looked down and hurriedly put the embroidered handkerchief back into his pocket. He took out another one and said, "Sorry, I took the wrong one." The embroidered handkerchief was Miss Cheng's personal item. He couldn't bear to take it out and let others write on it. Lu Guanyin almost vomited blood at his actions. Only now did Song Qing-shu realize that the man in front of him was Cheng Yaojia's husband. He could not help but awkwardly smile. "Don't misunderstand. I stole this brocade handkerchief from Cheng Yaojia. She did not give it to me." His original intention was to explain for Miss Cheng. After all, he had countless ways to obtain her. He didn't care about using petty tricks. However, these words had a different meaning in Lu Guanyin's ears. The other person thought that his relationship with his wife was so intimate that he actually took the initiative to exonerate his wife. That bitch. Lu Guanyin was burning with jealousy, his eyes almost spitting fire. Song Qing-shu shrugged his shoulders. He had already explained what he wanted to explain. As long as he had a clear conscience, there was no need to say anything else. Who asked Lu Guanyin to not believe his own wife? "Hey, do you still want to write? I don't have much time to waste." Under normal circumstances, Song Qing-shu would not have minded toying with Lu Guanyin. However, he was worried that Zhou Zhiruo had participated in the White Lotus Society's operation. He was even more worried that she would be in danger. How could he be in a mood to talk nonsense with Lu Guanyin? "All right, I'll write it." Lu Guanyin's tone suddenly became incomparably calm. He took the pen that Song Qing-shu handed over and quickly filled the entire handkerchief. Divorce letter? After reading the contents of the handkerchief, Song Qing-shu frowned. "Do you know how much Cheng Yaojia sacrificed to save you?" Lu Guanyin could not help but imagine the scene of his wife selling her body. His face could not help but twitch as he roared, "Who needs her to save me?" Rather than damaging the Lu family's reputation and causing him to be mocked by the world in the future, it was better to strike first and take the initiative to expel her from the family. This way, he would be able to barely save his face. Song Qing-shu had lived 2 lives and was already very clear about the ways of the world. After hesitating for a moment, He roughly guessed what the other person was thinking. He could not help but sigh. A man's pitiful self-esteem. What did you say? Lu Guanying was like a wounded beast as he stared fixedly at him. Nothing. Song Qingshu did not choose to continue to provoke him. In his heart, he even somewhat understood him. If they were in each other's shoes, presumably his performance would not be any better than his. Jealousy and other negative emotions were originally weaknesses in human nature that could not be restrained. Who in this world could truly think rationally every time? Before leaving, Song Qingshu suddenly turned his head back. That's right. Although you do not appreciate my kindness, I do not want to see Qing Yaojia sad in the future. I still have to remind you that the best way to deal with the enemy's interrogation is not to grit your teeth and not speak, but to deliberately mislead them. Remember this sentence, lest you are killed by the Mongolians before I can save you. After saying that, without waiting for his reply, Song Qingshu disappeared outside the door and went all the way to the front yard, wanting to see if he would run into Zhou Zhuhua. However, Song Qingshu was soon disappointed. The entire pure jade monastery was filled with corpses, but unfortunately, there was no trace of Zhou Zhuhua. Song Qingshu could not help but feel dispirited. Just as he was about to leave and let the Mongolians and the White Lotus Society fight each other, he suddenly saw a familiar figure from the corner of his eyes. He could not help but exclaim in surprise and hastily stopped in his tracks. The White Lotus Society had clearly underestimated the strength of the pure jade monastery's guards. After a round of contact, they immediately suffered a great loss. Because Song Qingshu had been delayed by Lu Guanying for a while, the situation on the battlefield was already very clear. The Ryong household had many experts, and they also had the geographical advantage. Coupled with the White Lotus Society's misinformation, the White Lotus Society's defeat was already set in stone. Only a few of their elites were still struggling to hold on. Of course, the White Lotus Society had sent out all their elites this time, and the Ryong household had similarly suffered heavy losses. Originally, Song Qingshu could not be bothered to pay attention to the fight between the two sides. However, the woman that Taoist Baisang, the guardian deity, and the Xianming elders were attacking was the mysterious woman from the bamboo forest. Both Taoist Baisang and the guardian deity were super experts in the pugilistic world. Although the Xianming elders were slightly weaker, they were not inferior to the two when they joined forces. Although the mysterious woman's martial arts were high, she was not Song Qingshu after all. In just a short while, she had already been in danger several times. It was obvious that she had suffered serious internal injuries. If it were not for the ingenuity of her rippling waves technique, she would probably have been defeated and killed long ago. Although she could barely hold on with the help of her Qinggong, once the other experts of the Ryong household finished off the White Lotus disciples and surrounded her, she would not be able to use her Qinggong no matter how good she was. What's her relationship with the White Lotus Society? Song Qingshu had originally thought that she was from the Carefree sect, but now it seemed that she was not. His doubts were resolved very soon. He saw a man and a woman cut down the foreign monk in front of them and immediately run over to block Taoist Baisang and the guardian deity. At the same time, they called out to the woman, "Holy Mother, go!" The White Lotus Mother. Song Qingshu was quite surprised. The White Lotus cult had always been extremely mysterious in the pugilistic world. Countless people were curious about who their leader was, but unfortunately, no one in the pugilistic world had ever seen her before. They only knew that the leader of the White Lotus cult was a woman known as the White Lotus Mother. Will I be the first person in the pugilistic world to see the White Lotus Mother's true appearance? The corner of Song Qingshu's lips curled up slightly. He suddenly became rather complacent. Chapter 1063. With the most powerful sect master and Taoist priest kept busy, the mysterious woman immediately felt the pressure on her lesson. She forced back the Xianming elders with a palm strike, as she said hesitantly, but she understood that if she left in the current situation, the two of them would probably be dead for sure. The man laughed boldly. If the Holy Mother hadn't saved us back then, we would have died a long time ago. Not only have we lived for a few more years, but we've even helped the Holy Mother once. Even if we die, it'll be worth it." The woman beside him also said, "Holy Mother, you should go. If you leave, you can still avenge us in the future. If you hesitate any longer, probably none of you will be able to leave later." Song Qingshu nodded secretly. This couple was rather ancient. They really were worthy of admiration. As the leader of a cult, the White Lotus Mother was obviously not someone who could be indecisive. She glanced at the two of them deeply before forcefully mobilizing her true qi and vanishing from the walls. The sect master and Taoist priest were both surprised and furious. They wanted to stop her, but unfortunately, the couple who kept them busy were no weaklings either. They were the youngest elders of the White Lotus cult, so their martial arts were extraordinary. Coupled with the fact that they were husband and wife, they could work together tacitly, so the sect master and Taoist priest were unable to do anything to them for the time being. All they could do was watch the White Lotus Mother leave. However, the couple's martial arts were nowhere close to the sect master and Taoist priest after all. They could keep them busy for a while, but it would be a little wishful thinking if they wanted to keep them busy forever. Before long, the couple were both struck by a palm strike from the enemy, immediately becoming heavily injured. They no longer had the ability to continue fighting. Fortunately, the sect master and the others were in a hurry to catch up to the White Lotus Mother, so they did not have the time to claim their lives. They only ordered the foreign monks nearby to capture the two of them before rushing off in the direction the White Lotus Mother had vanished in. "This woman seems to be quite pretty. Capture her and enjoy her." The foreign monks were all monks who indulged in debauchery in the first place. Recently, due to Wang Baobao's strict orders, they were afraid to leave the Jade Clarity Monastery to relieve themselves. They had been stifled to death in the Jade Clarity Monastery a long time ago. Although the White Lotus Mother was a supreme beauty, they knew their own identities, so they dared not entertain any wishful thinking. However, the woman before them was different. Even if they captured her and enjoyed her, the young king probably would not blame them. Seeing the foreign monks surrounding them, a trace of determination flashed in the eyes of the husband and wife. They raised the swords in their hands and were about to commit suicide to avoid being humiliated. Who would have thought that there would suddenly be a suction force coming from their bodies, and the two of them involuntarily flew into the air. When the two of them came to their senses, they had already landed outside of the pure Jade Monastery. In front of them stood a bearded man who was smiling at the two of them. The bearded man was obviously Song Qingshu, disguised as Tang Quobi. Originally, he planned on pursuing the White Lotus Mother, but when he saw the couple in danger before he left, he saved them along the way. After all, he admired the loyalty of this couple. How could he allow them to be humiliated in the hands of thieves? The couple quickly reacted and hurriedly bowed to him. "Thank you for saving our lives. May I ask for your name, sir?" Song Qingshu smiled. "It was nothing. There's no need to worry about it." The husband clasped his hands in admiration and said, "Sir, you truly are righteous when you show kindness without asking for anything in return. I am Zhou Xiangji, and this is my wife, Huang Yihong. She's currently an elder of the White Lotus cult. If there's anything we can do for you in the future, sir, you only need to send a message to the White Lotus cult. The two of us will do anything for you without hesitation. If fate allows it, we'll definitely meet again." Song Qingshu smiled. "The two of you better find a place to properly heal. I will go save the White Lotus Mother." The couple looked at each other and saw the joy in each other's eyes. They originally planned on saving the White Lotus Mother, but now that this person had taken action, he would obviously be much more useful than them. "Thank you." Just when the two of them were about to thank him, they discovered that he had already vanished. They could not help but sigh. Now, this is the bearing of a master. Huang Yihong deeply agreed. "If I have the opportunity in the future, I'll definitely return his kindness." "Of course." Zhou Xiangji's expression was solemn and resolute. After the White Lotus Mother fled from the clear Jade Monastery, she only felt her aura surge. She felt dizzy but she understood that she could not faint at a time like this. All she could do was grit her teeth and run towards a remote location. As she ran, she secretly cursed the bearded man she had encountered in the bamboo forest earlier. If it were not for the fact that she had exhausted herself in the battle earlier, how could she have become injured in the clear jade monastery so easily? Damned bearded man, you better not end up in my hands. The White Lotus Mother snorted through gritted teeth. Are you talking about me? A familiar yet despicable voice suddenly rang out by her ear. The White Lotus Mother was almost frightened out of her wits. She looked over in a hurry. Who else could it be other than the bearded man from before? The White Lotus Mother bit her lip and extended her hand to attack him. Song Qingshu had already grown accustomed to her style of fighting as soon as she disagreed with him. He was basically already prepared for it. Coupled with the fact that she was heavily injured, both her strength and speed were nowhere close to before, he immediately grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his arms. The White Lotus Mother's expression changed, and she began to struggle in a hurry. Unfortunately, he gripped her wrist firmly, and her hands had wrapped around her body. She was unable to break free for a moment. She still wanted to struggle, but he pressed a finger against her lips. Chill. The White Lotus Mother was both embarrassed and furious. Just when she was about to lose her temper, her expression suddenly changed. As it turned out, the indestructible Taoist, the sect master, and the others had caught up to her. All she could do was hold back her anger and settle down. Where has she gone? I clearly saw her run in this direction, the sect master said in doubt. Don't worry. She's been struck by my profound underworld palm and your great strength guardian finger. She can't have run far. Let's search the surroundings carefully. The indestructible Taoist sneered. As it turned out, while the two of them possessed great martial arts, they were not particularly skilled in movement techniques, which was why they had taken so long to catch up to the heavily injured White Lotus Mother. However, the two of them were not particularly worried. After all, their inner force was abundant, while the White Lotus Mother was injured. Even if she managed to run ahead for a short period of time, she would still not be able to shake them off. She would definitely end up in their hands in the end. I never thought the extremely mysterious White Lotus Mother of the Jianghu would actually be so young. As the two of them searched, the indestructible Taoist sighed emotionally. Most importantly, she's so pretty. The sect master gulped. Even though she's wearing a veil, you can tell from her exposed features that she's definitely a supreme beauty. What's even rarer is her curvaceous figure. She's basically a supreme beauty in bed. Song Qingshu snickered inside. He gently pinched the beauty in his arms and whispered into her ear, "He's praising you." The White Lotus Mother trembled from anger. Normally, she stood supreme in the sect, wielding power over life and death. Regular people would not even dare to raise their heads at her. Yet now, she had actually encountered 3 perverts who had offended her in a row. In particular, the man behind her had taken liberties with her several times, and he was even holding her in his arms right now, taking advantage of her. He was the most despicable person out of the 3 of them. Hee, shouldn't you monks abstain from lust? The indestructible Taoist sneered. The sect master could tell what he was implying, so he immediately looked at him cautiously. Old fart, you better not take this woman from me, or I'll fall out with you. Huh, why does she have to be yours? I also want to have my fun with a supreme beauty like her. The indestructible Taoist opposed him with equal harshness. He had no intentions of backing down. You. The sect master was furious, but he was still rather fearful of his martial arts. All right then, once we capture her, we'll enjoy her together. The indestructible Taoist also knew that his martial arts were no weaker than his, so he was afraid of offending him too much. He immediately nodded in agreement. All right, that woman's seductive. Let alone the 2 of us. Even if there were 2 more of us, she'd probably be unable to leave the bed. The 2 of them glanced at one another before laughing aloud. They say you're seductive. Song Qingshu did not mind the situation escalating as he watched. He blew gently into her ear. The White Lotus Mother's face had already darkened a long time ago. How could she hold herself back when she heard that? Shut up. No one's going to treat you like a mute if you don't talk. With that, she immediately attracted the attention of the indestructible Taoist and the sect master. Over there, Song Qing-shu could not help but shoot a glance at her. Look what you've done. The White Lotus Mother snorted gently and directly turned around. She did not seem to care at all. With no other choice, all Song Qing-shu could do was run away with her in his arms. Beauty, don't run away. Old fart. Later on, whoever catches her first will get to drink the soup first. What do you think? That's exactly what I want. Because Song Qing-shu ran too quickly, the two of them failed to see him clearly. They only thought the White Lotus Mother had used a method to burn her essence blood in order to flee, temporarily increasing her speed. As a result, they were not surprised. Instead, they were overjoyed. After all, this was only quenching their thirst with poison. The two of them possessed great martial arts, and they had purposefully mixed their inner force in an attempt to disturb the White Lotus Mother's mind. As a result, even though Song Qing-shu had fled very far away with the White Lotus Mother, he could still vaguely hear their conversation. These two old perverts sure are birds of a feather. Song Qing-shu could not help but laugh. As the female lead of the conversation, the White Lotus Mother was not as forgiving as him. She trembled from anger, and she could not help but cough up a great mouthful of blood, dyeing her veil red. Song Qing-shu removed her veil and noticed her frown. He could not help but smile. It's not like I haven't seen it before, so why do you have such a great reaction? The White Lotus Mother rolled her eyes, but she did not say anything else. Song Qing-shu used his veil to wipe away the blood from the corner of her lips, as he explained. Don't take what they said to heart. Those two old farts' movement techniques are nowhere near as great as yours. They're purposefully saying that to provoke you into going back and throwing your life at them. If you really can't control your emotions, that's exactly what they want. What haven't I been through? Do I need you to teach me something so trivial? The White Lotus Mother turned her head away and said coldly. Song Qing-shu could not help but sigh in amazement at the wonders of the Creator. The woman's figure was abnormally hot. As soon as men saw her, they would develop an urge to press her down on the bed and give her a good spanking. Every single strand of hair and skin on her body was the standard of a vixen, but who knew that her personality was completely different? She was basically so cold that even her voice seemed to give off a faint sense of coldness. My book friend, Zhou Xiangji, and his wife, Huang Yihong, are making a cameo appearance. This monk wishes the two of them to be in love and grow old together. Chapter 1064. However, Song Qing-shu had interacted with many beauties over the years. Some were gentle, some were fierce, some were cold, some were passionate, and so on and so forth. He knew that every single woman had their own special characteristics, so not only did he not take her attitude to heart, but he even found it particularly interesting. Since you've been through so much, why are you still vomiting blood? Knowing what they're up to is one thing, but vomiting blood or not is another, the White Lotus Mother replied coldly. Song Qing-shu smiled and said, Keep being stubborn. Earlier, I checked the condition of your body. It is already a mess. You are relying on the breath in your chest to hold on. When you vomit blood, that veritable chi will leak out. If I let you go, you will not be able to take more than 3 steps before fainting. Let go of me. I'll try walking by myself. The White Lotus Mother was stubborn as well, so she extended her hand and pushed him away as she said that. Song Qing-shu shrugged. All right then, you can walk by yourself. With that, he really did let go of her. Without his support, the White Lotus Mother tottered, but she gritted her teeth and forcefully stabilized herself. Afterwards, she took a step forward and snorted coldly. 1. This is only the first step. Song Qing-shu smiled. 2. The White Lotus Mother took another step forward and glanced back at him rather complacently at the same time. Song Qing-shu was in no hurry. He extended his hand and gestured for her to continue. 3. The White Lotus Mother did not hesitate at all. She took another step forward, but before she could even become complacent, her expression suddenly changed. She glanced at him deeply. All right then. You win. As soon as she finished speaking, her body softly fell to the ground. Song Qing-shu was already prepared for this and helped her up. He shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Why did you have to do this? Trying to be brave will only make your internal injuries worse." The White Lotus Mother's beautiful eyes seemed to be closed. Her moist, red lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, but she was powerless right now. She did not even have the strength to speak. Let's talk about it later. Those two old perverts are about to catch up. While the two of them were delayed, Taoist Baisang and Sect Master Vajra were gradually approaching. Song Qing-shu had already arrived. He sensed their auras. "Where are you taking me?" The White Lotus Mother had finally gathered some strength now. She grabbed Song Qing-shu's clothes with both hands and asked rather weakly. "I'll take you to a safe place," Song Qing-shu said with a smile. He picked up her legs and carried her horizontally before disappearing. After a while, Taoist Baishang and the guardian deity appeared in the same place. That's strange. With her internal injuries, she shouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Could we be chasing in the wrong direction? Taoist Baishuang said doubtfully. The master of the guardian deity sucked in a deep breath and became intoxicated. "It's in this direction. I can already smell the blood-boiling scent on her." "Then what are we waiting for? Let's chase after her." As soon as he thought of her curvaceous figure, Taoist Baishuang felt his lower abdomen heat up. He immediately felt like spring had arrived. "Hold on." The master of the guardian deity grabbed him. His expression was rather ugly. "What are we waiting for?" Taoist Baishuang was confused. Apart from the White Lotus Mother's scent, there's also a man's scent here. The master of the guardian deity's expression was rather ugly. "A man?" Taoist Baishuang was taken aback before laughing aloud. "It's probably the White Lotus cult who's come to receive him. With the two of us working together, are we supposed to be afraid of him?" The master of the guardian deity shook his head sternly. He pointed at the ground and said, "Old bastard, haven't you discovered that there aren't any footprints on the ground at all?" Taoist Baishuang looked in the direction of his finger. He examined the ground for several dozen meters, but there did not seem to be any tracks at all. He could not help but cry out involuntarily, "Traceless treading on sand." He's carrying the heavily injured White Lotus Mother. Yet he hasn't even left behind a single footprint with his movement technique. Clearly, his movement technique is far superior to ours. Even if we want to chase after him, we won't be able to catch up, and even if we do catch up, we probably won't be his opponent. The master of the guardian deity sighed. Taoist Baishuang was doubtful. "There's someone that powerful in the world?" The master of the guardian deity snorted. "Have you forgotten about the embroidery bandit from that night?" Taoist Baishuang was shocked and immediately fell silent. "Let's go back, just in case we end up failing miserably when we're so confident," the master of the guardian deity said sternly. "It's better to be safe than sorry." Taoist Baishuang nodded, expressing his agreement. However, he still struggled to hide his gloominess. "God damn it, we've worked so hard for half a day, but it's all for someone else in the end." When he thought of the White Lotus Mother's enchanting figure, the master of the guardian deity felt the same way. "I wonder just which bastard has ended up taking advantage of her." Achoo! Song Qing-shu sneezed heavily. He was confused. With his current martial arts, he was already impervious to heat and cold. So why was he still sneezing? The White Lotus Mother had originally fallen asleep because she was too weak, but she was woken up by his sneeze. She studied the surroundings curiously. "What is this place?" "A safe place." Song Qing-shu smiled. He did not explain in detail. Actually, Song Qing-shu was very hesitant about where to take her. Originally, he planned on taking her to Jiao Wan'er's place, but he did not want the White Lotus cult to know everything about the Golden Snake Camp's hidden sentries. At the same time, he did not want to neglect Mu Wanqing by saving her either, so he just took her to the Dao Tai's government office. Even though Tang Quobian's identity needed to be concealed, he was still a member of the Jin Kingdom after all. Information did not circulate much with the Southern Song dynasty, so it was not like the White Lotus Mother knew that Tang Quobian knew martial arts. Not to mention that she was heavily injured right now. As long as she was a little more careful, he could even hide Tang Quobian's identity from her. You're deliberately mystifying me. The White Lotus Mother curled her lip and looked around. Unfortunately, she was unable to tell where this place was even with her experience in the Jianghu, so she could only let nature take its course. The bearded man was mysterious anyway, but he did not seem to have any ill intention so far. Mu Wanqing was feeling bored and angry in her room when she suddenly heard movement outside the door. Knowing that Song Qingshu had returned, the worry in her heart was instantly swept away, and she hurriedly ran out in high spirits. Just as she was about to welcome him, she suddenly saw that he was carrying a woman in his arms, and the smile on her face instantly froze. How could you do this? Mu Wanqing stomped her foot, and tears immediately flowed from her eyes. She thought about how she had already been feeling stifled because of Cheng Yaojia's matter, yet he ended up returning with a woman the moment he left. Looks like this isn't the safe place you mentioned. The White Lotus Mother raised her head and looked at Song Qingshu, taking pleasure in his misfortune. With her martial arts and identity, she obviously found it beneath her to be jealous of a young girl. As a result, although she found Mu Wanqing's voice to be rather familiar, she had no interest in glancing at her. Unexpectedly, Mu Wanqing stared at her with widened eyes. So it's you. As soon as Mu Wanqing finished speaking, she called out and drew the dagger on her waist, stabbing it towards the White Lotus Mother. Song Qingshu was utterly confused, but the White Lotus Mother was heavily injured right now, so he could not just stand by and watch. All he could do was hug her and dodge Mu Wanqing's fatal strike. Seeing how she still wanted to continue her attack, he asked in a hurry, Wanqing, what are you doing? Mu Wanqing pointed her dagger at the woman in his arms. Do you know who she is? I probably. Song Qingshu said with some uncertainty. He struggled to understand just what grievances Mu Wanqing had with the White Lotus Mother. Whether it was martial arts or strength, they were clearly not on the same level. Since you know, why are you still helping her? Because of what had happened before, Mu Wanqing had already felt extremely wronged. Now that she saw Song Qingshu actually choose to help her great opponent, she suddenly felt rather disheartened. Noticing Mu Wanqing's strange expression, Song Qingshu said in a hurry, Wanqing, listen to me. Originally, I thought I knew who she was, but from your reaction, my previous judgment was clearly wrong, so I don't think I know who she is. Looks like you're quite worried about your little lover. The White Lotus Mother laughed gently when she saw him ramble on like he was speaking in a tongue twister. She obviously recognized Mu Wanqing now, but she was confused as to why Mu Wanqing would be entangled with a person from the Jin Nation. Mu Wanqing had also become confused by the long speech, but she could sense that Song Qingshu was still worried about her, so she immediately calmed down slightly. At the same time, she was worried that her lover had been tricked, so she said in a hurry, She's the Madame Wang that I've always wanted to kill. Madame Wang? Song Qingshu's mind blanked out for a few seconds before he returned to his senses. He could not help but stare at the woman in his arms in surprise. You're Li Qingluo? He could not help but feel surprised. Li Qingluo was the daughter of Wu Yazi and Li Qiushui. Afterwards, she married into the Wang family of Gusu, but she was seduced by the king of South Jinan, Duan Zhengchun, and she gave birth to an illegitimate daughter in the end, but she became Duan Yu's elder sister, Wang Yiyan. How do you know my full name? The White Lotus Mother looked at him in surprise. Clearly, she had tacitly accepted her identity. I know a lot of things. That was what Song Qingshu said, but he was completely dumbfounded inside. How could the White Lotus Mother be Li Qingluo? In the original story, Li Qingluo was just a woman who had fallen in love with Duan Zhengchun. She would often cut down men and use them as fertilizer. Her greatest wish in life was to spend the rest of her life with Duan Zhengchun, and theoretically speaking, she should not know any martial arts, unlike right now. She had even managed to escape with her life from the encirclement of the master of the Guardian King sect, the 100 Damages Taoist, and the Xianming elders. However, Song Qingshu was still a transmigrator after all, so he accepted this reality very soon. As it seemed, The butterfly effect from his arrival in this wondrous world was really impressive. Seeing how Song Qingshu really did not know her true identity, Mu Wanqing immediately forgave him. Song Qingshu, move aside. Let me end this bitch in a single stroke. Mu Wanqing's personality was like a flame wrapped in ice. She dared to love and hate, and her emotions came and went very quickly. In the previous moment, she was tempted to sever all ties with Song Qingshu, but in the next moment, she was filled with love. You've come to Montois Villa time and time again to kill me. That bitch Qin Homian must have ordered you to do so, Li Qingluo asked coldly. Don't you dare insult my mother. Mu Wanqing was furious. She stabbed her sword towards her chest. Song Qingshu immediately felt his head swell. He obviously did not want Li Qingluo to die like this, but he was even more reluctant to destroy his relationship with Mu Wanqing because of an outsider. Chapter 1065. Right when Song Qingshu had no idea what to do, Li Qingluo suddenly moved in his arms. She raised her hand and swept her sleeve, and Mu Wanqing felt her wrist become numb. She could no longer hold onto the dagger in her hand, and it fell to the ground with a clang. This should be the legendary acupoint brushing sleeves with cold sleeves from the leisure sect. Song Qingshu nodded to himself. This move really was brilliant. Of course, because Li Qingluo was heavily injured and powerless, the move would not harm Mu Wanqing at all, which was why he was so relaxed. Mu Wanqing was immediately stunned. She had always believed that this person was just a noble lady who lived a comfortable life. Who would have thought that she actually possessed such great martial arts? If she had known beforehand, why would she have overestimated herself and gone to Montois Villa time and time again to assassinate her? You're not my opponent. You better let Qin Homian do it herself. Li Qingluo forcefully gathered her true qi. Clearly, she was in great pain right now. A sliver of blood seeped out from the corner of her lips again. Qin Homian possesses martial arts as great as yours. Song Qingshu was immediately dumbfounded. He suddenly felt like Duan Zhengshun really was like a little cow standing on its head. He was absolutely amazing. Not only were all the women he picked up beautiful, but they were also so tough. Li Qingluo shook her head. I'm not particularly certain about that. However, her nickname is the Azure Blade, so her martial arts can't be too bad. Song Qingshu basically prostrated himself in admiration towards this reason. As it turned out, she, the mighty white lotus mother, actually judged someone's strength based on their nickname. Song Qingshu, are you helping me or her? Mu Wanqing finally returned to her senses. She realized she still had a trump card in the form of her lover. No matter how great Li Qingluo's martial arts were, could she surpass Song Qingshu? Not to mention that she was still injured. Ugh, obviously I'm helping you, Song Qingshu said without the slightest hesitation. All right then. Then kill her for me right now, Mu Wanqing said while biting her lip. Song Qingshu lowered his head and looked at the beautiful woman in his arms. He saw that her eyes were indifferent. He hesitated for a moment before he placed her on the edge of the flower bed and sat her down. He ran over and pulled Mu Wanqing to the other side. Wanqing, the reason why I saved her was because I had my own difficulties. What difficulties could you possibly have? Mu Wanqing stared at the other party's exaggerated figure and said snappily. Song Qingshu felt rather awkward as well. After all, he still judged a person by their appearance to a very large extent. If the White Lotus Mother were as pretty as a pig, why would he take such a great risk to save her even if her identity was extremely useful? However, he was also thick-skinned and said calmly, just now, you said that I don't know her identity, but in fact, you also don't know her identity. Isn't she Madame Wang from Montois Villa? Mu Wanqing asked with a puzzled expression. Ahem, of course she is Madame Wang, but this is only one of her identities. Think about it carefully. Do you think Madame Wang has such a high level of martial arts? Song Qingshu hurriedly explained. She doesn't. Mu Wanqing shook her head. She had actually thought it through very clearly already. If her mother really knew her martial arts were so great, she would never have sent her to her death. As a result, even her mother, who had been friends with her for several decades, had no idea Madame Wang knew martial arts, which only demonstrated just how well hidden she was. Because she's the White Lotus cult's madam. Song Qing-shu then tossed out a heavy bomb. What? Mu Wanqing wandered the Jianghu, so she obviously knew what kind of existence the White Lotus Mother was. She was a major figure of the underworld who stood on par with the leaders of the Ming dynasty and the Sun Moon God sect. How could she be provoked with her martial arts? Wanqing, you also know about the Golden Snake Camp's current situation and just how valuable the White Lotus Mother is. That's why I've gone to such great lengths to save her. Song Qing-shu wanted to say something else, but Mu Wanqing pressed her finger against his mouth in a hurry. Don't worry. Am I the kind of woman who doesn't care about the bigger picture? My personal grievances with her are small. Your proper business is more important. When he saw Mu Wanqing's pure gaze, Song Qing-shu suddenly felt a wave of guilt. He felt like he was not worthy of her unreserved love. Mixed feelings welled up inside him. He pulled her into his arms and said deeply into her ear, Wanqing, it doesn't matter if your father is the Prince of Dali or the great General of Xixia. I will definitely marry you. When she heard that, Mu Wanqing suddenly felt like all of the grievances she had suffered were nothing. She subconsciously embraced the man before her tightly. It's broad daylight. Don't you find it disgusting? Li Qingluo suddenly said from nearby. Mu Wanqing immediately blushed in embarrassment. She pushed Song Qing-shu away and ran back to her room like a wisp of smoke. Song Qing-shu could not help but smile when he saw how she had suddenly behaved like a little girl. He said to her back in a hurry, I'll tend her wounds first. I'll come find you after I'm done. However, the only response he received was the sound of the door closing with a bang. Looks like your charm isn't all that. Li Qingluo sneered from the side. Of course a woman like you won't be able to understand the interest between lovers. Song Qing-shu was currently in a great mood. Let me give you a kind reminder. I'm very charming, so don't accidentally fall in love with me in the future. I'll fall in love with you. Li Qingluo glanced at him in disdain. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? I look at myself in the mirror every day. I'm extremely certain of my charm. Song Qing-shu did not mind her ridicule at all. You, though, don't be too full of yourself. Boring. Li Qingluo rolled her eyes and no longer paid any attention to him. If she encountered a man like that on a normal day, she would have used him as fertilizer a long time ago. Whatever. I'm in a good mood today, so I won't lower myself to your level. Song Qing-shu walked over and picked her up. Li Qingluo finally paled slightly. What are you doing? I'm obviously dealing with your internal injuries. I don't want to save a dead White Lotus Mother. Song Qing-shu laughed aloud and carried her into another room. With what had happened before, how could he still be bold enough to stay next to Mu Wanqing and Cheng Yaojia? Fortunately, the garden was large enough and there were enough empty rooms. He specially found a room far away from Mu Wanqing's residence. Thank you. When she sensed that he was actually healing her, Li Qingluo could not help but say softly, Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. I didn't save you for nothing. Originally, Song Qing-shu wanted to strike a deal with her first, but Li Qingluo's injuries had worsened. Coupled with the forceful use of force earlier, if he did not treat her in time, the White Lotus Mother would probably become the White Lotus Ghost Mother. As a result, he could only save her first. However, Song Qing-shu was not an idiot. It was impossible for him to let her recover so easily. As a result, he only stabilized her injuries initially before planning on stopping. Chapter 1066. Dark North Divine Art. A martial art suddenly appeared in Song Qing-shu's mind. Since Li Qingluo knew the cold sleeve acupuncture point and the wave-like subtle steps, it was not surprising that she knew the famous northern underworld divine kung fu of the Xiaoyao sect. Song Qing-shu sighed inwardly. He had been too careless today. He was so focused on saving her that he did not guard against her dark north divine art. In the original demigods and semi-devils, Duan Yu had only cultivated the lung meridian of Hantain in the dark north divine art, and had sucked away all the inner force of a top expert, Jiumaji. Li Qingluo clearly knew the full set, and the power was far greater than Duan Yu's. Wouldn't he be sucked dry by her? Thinking of the horror, Song Qingshu could not help but shiver. He hurriedly said in a low voice, "I saved you out of kindness, and this is how you repay me?" Li Qingluo slowly opened her eyes and sneered. "I hate golden men the most in my life, not to mention that you have taken advantage of me several times before. Humph, but you don't have to worry. Since you helped me before, I will let you live after sucking dry your inner force." So, she was pretending to be asleep. Song Qingshu understood. She must have discovered his identity when he entered the yamen. "Should I thank you?" Song Qingshu said in annoyance. "You don't have to hate me. You can only blame yourself for being too stupid. The Jianghu is a dangerous place. Who told you to forget everything when you saw my beauty? I know exactly what you were thinking, but I am a mighty white lotus mother. How could I be the kind of girl who would fall in love with a man just because I was saved by him?" Li Qingluo sneered again and again. Under her beautiful appearance, she suddenly displayed the dignity of an underworld overlord. "I was indeed careless." Song Qingshu suddenly sighed. "If I say I am not a golden man, will you still repay me like this?" "I know. Aren't you the Golden Snake King, Song Qingshu?" Li Qingluo said lightly. Song Qingshu was taken aback. The fact that he had impersonated Tang Qibian was a top secret. He had never told anyone about it, except for a few of his close friends. Now that the Holy Mother of the White Lotus Society knew about it, all the plans of the Jin Kingdom would be for naught. "How did you know?" Song Qingshu did not deny it. At their level, it was beneath them to quibble and act shamelessly. Furthermore, Li Qingluo's tone was certain, so she definitely had some concrete evidence and was not making wild guesses. "Mu Wanqing, that girl, has tried to assassinate me time and time again. I have to clearly investigate her background. If it weren't for the fact that she's Golden Snake King's woman, do you think I would have let her go back alive after she repeatedly came to Montua Villa to assassinate me?" Li Qingluo's cold face finally showed a hint of a smile when she sensed the surging true qi in her body. Mu Wanqing is stubborn, and she's unwavering in love. It's impossible for her to fall in love with someone else so quickly, not to mention that her lover is a bearded man from the Jin Kingdom. Furthermore, the martial arts you revealed earlier are too powerful, and there are only a handful of such experts in the Jianghu. I know each and every one of their backgrounds. After eliminating them one by one, there's only the Golden Snake King who has been famous in the Jianghu for the past 2 years left. After Li Qingluo finished speaking, she casually took off the mask on his face. Looking at the handsome man in front of her, especially the unique charm between his brows, it was unforgettable after a glance. She couldn't help but subconsciously sigh. No wonder that girl, Mu Wanqing, was so infatuated with him. He's indeed not bad. I wonder if I can infatuate Madam? Song Qingshu smiled slightly, but he let out a long sigh of relief in his heart. It turned out that Mu Wanqing had revealed a flaw, and it was only by coincidence that Li Qingluo had guessed it. How could anyone else have guessed his true identity? The Golden Snake King is indeed the Golden Snake King. Even in such a situation, he's still so calm. It's really admirable. Although Li Qingluo said so, she did not dare to let down her guard. She hurriedly reached out to seal the acupoints all over his body and finally held his hands tightly. She activated the northern underworld divine power to the extreme and sucked madly. Song Qingshu glanced at their hands and could not help but smile. As the saying goes, the 10 fingers are connected to the heart. Now that our fingers are tightly intertwined, does this count as a heart-to-heart connection? After his reminder, Li Qingluo realized that their hands were tightly intertwined. She did not know why, but she suddenly felt her heart tremble. One had to know that Wang Yuyan's father had passed away when she was young, and ever since she married into the Wang clan, she had never contacted Duan Zhengshan. As a result, she had been alone for more than a decade now. She had never allowed a man to come within a 3-foot radius of her, let alone hugging and intertwining like today. The masculine aura on him made her involuntarily have some lustful thoughts, and her body gradually heated up. However, she was not an ordinary woman after all. She quickly forced herself to wake up. It's just to absorb his inner energy. So what if we touch skin to skin? Put away your disgusting act. Your method of seducing little girls won't work on me, Li Qingluo said with a straight face. Song Qingshu sighed. I wonder what I could do to make Madam let me go. Li Qingluo thought that he had finally given in and could not help but show a hint of smugness on her face. Just give up. If you don't remove the roots, it will grow again with the spring wind. As the White Lotus School's holy mother, how could I make such a low-level mistake as releasing a tiger back into the mountains? But what if I tell you that we're on the same side? Song Qingshu suddenly asked. On the same side? Li Qingluo almost choked to death. When she heard this, she glared at him angrily. Who's on the same side as you? She had always kept her chastity, and she could not even tolerate a man taking advantage of her verbally. Wang Yuyin and I love each other, and we've long since pledged to marry each other. I originally wanted to find some time to come to Montois Villa to ask for your hand in marriage, but I didn't expect that I would meet you in this sort of situation. Song Qingshu made up a story without batting an eyelid. He believed that with Wang Yiyin's kindness and the friendship between them, even if she knew that he was making up stories, she might not mind. Madam, do you think that we're on the same side with this kind of relationship? Yiyin. Li Qingluo was stunned. Then, she flew into a rage. Nonsense. Yiyin clearly liked her cousin, so why would she pledge to marry you? Even though Li Qingluo knew that there was a high possibility that it was fake, her expression still turned incredibly sour. It's a pity that Murong Fu's heart isn't with Yiyin. He only wants to revive that Yin kingdom or whatever, and he's already hurt Yiyin's heart multiple times. That's why he created a chance for me. Song Qingshu explained calmly. Murong Fu is indeed ambitious, but his life is as fragile as a piece of paper. Besides, he has evil intentions, and he's definitely not a good match for Yiyin. Li Qingluo had never liked Murong Fu either, and she nodded in agreement. However, she quickly came to a realization and snorted coldly. I know my daughter's personality the best. There's no way that she'll fall in love with someone else so easily. Madam, ask yourself honestly. In terms of martial arts, appearance, character, family background, and power, which aspect of me isn't greater than Murong Fu's? Besides, a friend in need is a friend indeed. What's so strange about Yiyin liking me? Song Qingshu put on a wronged expression, as if he was telling the truth. Li Qingluo instantly fell silent. He knew that Murong Fu was right. When it came to martial arts, he was far above Murong Fu. When it came to looks, Murong Fu did not have that unique air that he had. When it came to family backgrounds, Wudong sect was much better than the empty shell of the Murong clan. When it came to power, one of them controlled tens of thousands of elite soldiers, while the other only had a few retainers. However, how could she be persuaded so easily? She sneered and said, I don't care about the other aspects, but I don't think you have any good character. Song Qingshu answered indifferently. I bravely saved you from danger and spared no effort to heal your wounds. Then I was plotted against by you. I don't know who has a bad character. Li Qingluo's face immediately flushed, and she flew into a rage out of humiliation. She said, even if Yiyin really likes you, so what? You flirt everywhere, and you have a wife at home. How can you be a good match for Yiyin? Even if Yiyin blames me in the future, I will get rid of you today, lest her happiness in the future be ruined by your hands. Song Qingshu was instantly dumbfounded. You said before that you only suck my inner force and wouldn't harm my life. In the end, after knowing that Yiyin and I love each other, you want to kill me? You can only blame yourself for messing with my daughter. A hint of killing intent appeared between Li Qingluo's brows, but it didn't affect her beauty at all. Instead, it gave her a different kind of charm. Song Qingshu finally put away his mischievous smile and said in a deep voice, Are you really not going to let me go? Li Qingluo became furious when she thought about how her daughter was naive, yet she had been fooled by this old fox. Not only will I kill you, but I'll kill that little bitch Mu Wanqing as well. Only then can I vent my hatred. Now that she had completely suppressed his acupoints, and coupled with the northern underworld divine arts constantly absorbing his inner force, victory was already in her grasp, so she was obviously not afraid of provoking him. Song Qingshu's eyes gradually reddened, and his voice became rather hoarse. All right, that's what you said. You better not regret it later. What can I regret? Li Qingluo sneered. Song Qingshu suddenly smiled strangely. He said sternly, Originally, I thought if you could stop halfway through, I could treat it as if nothing had happened. It's just a pity that I've given you a few chances, but not only do you refuse to stop, but you've even gone from bad to worse. Don't blame me for being impolite then. Li Qingluo frowned. She confirmed that the northern underworld divine arts were operating normally again, and only then did she stop worrying. You don't have to try and trick me. As the White Lotus Mother, what haven't I seen before? How can I be fooled by a trick like yours? Song Qingshu did not argue. He only said indifferently, Do you know why I rambled on about so much with you earlier? Li Qingluo sneered. You just wanted to buy time. Though the longer it takes, the more effective the northern underworld divine arts will be. I can't be bothered to expose your little thoughts. That's right. I'm waiting for your northern underworld divine arts to be as effective as possible. The corner of Song Qingshu's lips curled into a faint smile. What do you mean? Li Qingluo immediately felt an ill omen. Go for wool and come home shorn. Everyone hoped that Li Qingluo would cough, slip up. What would happen to her? Hurry up and throw your monthly passes at me. The more you throw, the more she'll lose. Chapter 1067. Do you feel your body heating up and your heart beating faster now? Song Qingshu looked at her meaningfully. Li Qingluo's heart trembled because she did feel that way, but she thought it was because the other party's inner strength was too vigorous and she was not used to it after absorbing it, so she did not take it to heart. But now that she heard him say it, it seemed that there was something fishy. You poisoned me. Li Qingluo was shocked and angry. It was fine if she did not know before, but now that he reminded her, she felt her body heating up and blushing uncontrollably appeared in her mind. Poison. Song Qingshu laughed and shook his head. I am not that despicable. As the leader of a sect, Li Qingluo was, after all, knowledgeable and intelligent. She quickly figured out the crux of the matter. Your vital energy. She carefully examined it and found that every time she absorbed a portion of the other party's vital energy, the heat in her body would increase by a portion. This was a situation that she had never encountered in so many years of cultivating the Northern Underworld divine technique. She hurriedly let go of the other party's hand in shock. But how could Song Qingshu let her get what she wanted so easily? He clasped his fingers and grabbed her hand tightly. Madam touched me so happily just now. Why are you in such a hurry to leave now? Who touched you? Li Qingluo tried to pull her hand back, but it did not move at all. She could not help but feel embarrassed and angry. Let go. She did not expect that after she cultivated the Northern Dark Divine technique, there would be a time when she wanted to get rid of the person whose inner strength was being absorbed. Madam's hand is really as smooth as a young girl's. It feels so good. Song Qingshu did not pay attention to her at all and commented on his own. You. Li Qingluo glared at him and was about to scold him, but who knew that when she opened her mouth, a sweet and greasy hum came out. Li Qingluo immediately closed her mouth and her beautiful eyes suddenly widened. She never expected that such a shameful sound would come from her. Song Qingshu laughed even more happily. He did not even wait for her Northern Dark Divine technique to absorb it and took the initiative to pour his inner chi of joy into her body. This was the reason why he was not flustered, even though he was restrained by the Northern Dark Divine technique. Because his inner chi of joy was the nemesis of all women. At that time, even Ah Qing, who had a terrifying cultivation and was an innocent sort of mortal who had no thoughts about men and women, couldn't resist it. Later, Xiaolong Nu, who didn't care about any man except Yang Guo, was accidentally invaded by the joyful genuine Qi. The icy beauty immediately turned into the hottest spring water, and this was under the condition that Song Qingshu didn't deliberately inject the joyful genuine Qi into her. Usually, when Song Qingshu played with his female friends, he would occasionally use some inner Qi of joy to add to the inner Qi of joy. No matter the shy or elegant women, they would all become the most flirty and would be the most obedient cats. In the women, he had offended. Everyone was so that he could not. Lin, and he Qing Luo that. In the inner Qi of love into the inner Qi of Shao. There was no one like Li Qing Luo who directly absorbed the inner Qi of joy into her body. Li Qing Luo's expression finally changed because she felt as if she had turned into a well, and her throat continuously emitted all kinds of shameful gasps. Fortunately, her cultivation was profound, and she temporarily retained a trace of clear-headedness. What the hell is this true Qi? Inner Qi of joy, Song Qingshu answered calmly. The Tantric sex dual cultivation method. Li Qing Luo was the White Lotus sex holy mother and had the carefree sex Wu Chang. She could be said to be the most knowledgeable person in the entire Jianghu. She immediately thought of this Tantric sex divine technique, and her mind went blank. It's over. This was her only thought at that moment. Let me go. Li Qing Luo's beautiful eyes looked like they were about to drip water. She gathered her remaining rationality and begged bitterly. Madam, do you remember how you treated me just now? Song Qingshu was not moved. But I'm Yu Yan's mother, and you have that kind of relationship with Yu Yan. How could you treat me like this? While Li Qing Luo was panicking, she finally found a reasonable excuse. Didn't you refuse to acknowledge our relationship just now? Song Qingshu let go of her hand. Li Qing Luo had absorbed so much inner Qi of joy into her body that she had long since lost the ability to fight back. I admit it. I'll admit it immediately. Didn't you say that you were going to Montua Villa to ask for my hand in marriage? Right now, I'll agree to it. From now on, Yu Yan will be your fiancé. Li Qing Luo's entire body started trembling uncontrollably. She looked as if she had been soaked in water. Her clothes had long since been drenched in sweat and stuck tightly to her body. It made her beautiful and peerless body outline even more curvaceous, and it made a person's blood boil. Is that so? Song Qingshu smiled faintly and moved closer to her ear to blow a breath of hot air. Actually, I was lying to you just now. There's nothing between me and Yu Yan. This breath of hot air was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Li Qing Luo only felt a loud bang go off in her head. Then, there was no longer any clarity in her eyes. She wrapped her arms around herself and wrapped herself tightly around Song Qingshu. Help me. Li Qing Luo twisted her body non-stop, and she wrapped herself tightly around him like a beautiful snake. She rubbed herself against his body non-stop in an attempt to quench the most primitive desire in her body. Song Qingshu closed his eyes and sat cross-legged on the bed while he quietly regulated the true Qi in his body. After all, he had been affected by her northern underworld divine power, and if he did not strengthen his foundation as soon as possible, he might end up with permanent internal injuries. The two of them were wrapped around each other. The man was as still as a mountain, and the woman was as passionate as fire. The entire scene was just like the scene in the movie Green Snake, where Fa Hai was seduced by a green snake. Of course, Song Qingshu was not Fa Hai, and he had no interest in being Fa Hai. When he finished regulating his breathing and opened his eyes, he found that his clothes had been torn to shreds by Li Qing Luo. He reached out and touched her body. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Wang Yuyin looked gentle and weak. He wondered if she had inherited her mother's bold and unrestrained nature. I feel so uncomfortable. Li Qing Luo kept kissing his body. Unfortunately, it couldn't alleviate the heat in her body at all. Instead, it aroused her desire even more. Take me. Li Qing Luo was after all no longer a young girl who had not experienced the ways of the world. Although she didn't know anything at the moment, her instincts told her what she should do. Hiss! Song Qing-shu suddenly took a deep breath. A line from a certain TV series from his previous life suddenly popped up in his mind. This woman's smooth. You only have yourself to blame. Glancing at the beauty in his arms, Song Qing-shu sighed. He turned over and pressed down heavily. After an unknown amount of time, Li Qingluo inadvertently regained a trace of consciousness. She realized that she was actually clinging to Song Qing-shu in an extremely embarrassing position. She could only mutter incoherently, "You bastard." Today, he saw the news that Jia Jingwen was pregnant with her third child. How long had it been since she gave birth to her second child? He really didn't know how to feel about it. But every time they did it without a condom, his heart ached when he thought about it. Chapter 1068. The room finally calmed down. Song Qing-shu wiped his sweat and thought to himself, Li Qingluo is like the magma under the iceberg. She was stimulated by the joyful, genuine qi and ignited the volcano in her body. It was too exciting. This was the first time Song Qing-shu felt powerless since he had mastered the joyous, genuine qi. The two of them fought for countless rounds that night, but Li Qingluo became more and more courageous as they fought. If it wasn't for Song Qing-shu's talent and the joyous zen, any other man would have been sucked dry. There is no such thing as a field that is overworked, only a cow that dies of exhaustion. Those old drivers in my previous life were right. Song Qing-shu decided that he would never play with fire like this again. A few strands of joyful, genuine qi were fun, but losing too much was asking for trouble. You bastard, at this moment, Li Qingluo was sprawled on the bed. She felt so weak that she didn't even want to move a finger. She allowed her perfect body to be exposed to the air, but she subconsciously repeated what she had said before. She looked as if she had been fished out of the water. Her skin was covered with a layer of fine sweat. Under the light of the fire, it emitted a tempting light, like a crystal-clear white jade guanine. I'm a bastard? Song Qing-shu couldn't help but say. You brought this upon yourself. Besides, you were the one who took the initiative to jump on me just now. I couldn't even push you away. Li Qingluo's face was already flushed from the lingering pleasure, and when she heard this, her face turned even redder. You were taking advantage of me. Who asked you to practice such a dirty martial art? This is orthodox Buddhist martial arts, okay? How was it despicable? Song Qing-shu was unhappy. If I didn't have this divine skill to protect my body, I would have been sucked dry by your northern underworld divine skill. No, I'm almost dry after this night. Bah, Li Qingluo said angrily. It was you who sucked half of my power in the end. Isn't this kind of plucking skill dirty? Song Qing-shu replied in a deep voice. There is no such thing as good or evil in martial arts, and there is no such thing as high or low class. It all depends on who is used on. When used on a pair of lovers, this martial art is a dual cultivation method of yin and yang complementing each other. When used on a person with ulterior motives like you, it can naturally be used as a technique to punish evil and promote good. It turned out that Song Qing-shu's internal energy was also severely depleted by the northern dark divine art. Naturally, he could only take advantage of the intimacy to regain the lost internal energy. In a daze, Li Qingluo could feel the vital qi in her body continuously leaking out. Although she was extremely anxious, she was stimulated by the vital qi of joy and could no longer control her body. Instead, she tried her best to cooperate with the other party. If it was not for Song Qing-shu, who saw the tears at the corner of her eyes, she would probably be no different from a disabled person now. Even so, she still lost almost half of her cultivation. It was a typical case of going for wool and coming home shorn. Although Li Qingluo could not help but lose her consciousness, after she woke up, the scene after scene actually appeared in her mind like a movie. Li Qingluo was embarrassed and angry, but also at a loss. For a moment, she bit her lips and stared blankly at him. Looking at Li Qingluo's beautiful body lying on the ground, Song Qingshu secretly praised in his heart. What a beautiful woman. In that situation, just now, if one could choose, even if it was very likely that they would be sucked dry, most men would still pounce on her without hesitation. Actually, you don't have to hate me so much. Although I've sucked half of your inner energy, firstly, you sucked me in first. I'm just giving you a taste of your own medicine. Secondly, I've also conveniently healed your internal injuries. You should know that with such serious injuries previously, if you were to heal them on your own, you definitely wouldn't be able to recover without at least half a year. Li Qingluo knew that what he said was the truth. Her previous injuries prevented her from fighting anyone for half a year. Otherwise, it would be even more difficult for her to recover. As the White Lotus Society's Holy Mother, she could be said to be sitting on the tip of a knife at all times. If anyone knew about her injuries, she would definitely not be able to survive until half a year later. Although she had now lost half of her cultivation, her internal injuries had already healed. In addition, with the Northern Underworld divine technique, it was not difficult for her to recover her strength. Therefore, from this point of view, she was not at a disadvantage no matter what. But tonight, she had not only lost half of her cultivation, she had always had her eyes on the top of her head. After her husband had passed away, she had kept her chastity for more than 10 years. Today, however, she was like the most lowly prostitute in a brothel, delighting under him. Thinking of the various scenes from earlier, Li Qingluo's voice became even colder. So, I should be thanking you? Song Qingshu seemed to be completely unaware of the sarcasm in her words. Instead, he nodded as if it was a matter of course. Of course. If you don't believe me, look in the mirror first. With a wave of his hand, the bronze mirror on the table was sucked into his hand. He placed it in front of Li Qingluo. Although Madam is beautiful, you previously looked as if all the men in the world owed you money. You looked like a resentful wife who was unable to satisfy her desires. But look at you now. Your brows are relaxed and charming. Your complexion is rosy and lustrous, and your entire body is glowing. You look like you're at least 20 years younger. My hard work and irrigation were not in vain. After all women love to be beautiful. Li Qingluo was originally looking at the beautiful young married woman in the mirror with a flushed face. She touched her own face and felt a faint sense of joy at the changes that had happened to her body. However, when she heard Song Qingshu's last sentence, she was so angry that she picked up the mirror and threw it at Song Qingshu. Song Qingshu took the mirror and could not help but burst into laughter. All right, I'll stop joking. I have 2 questions for you now. Li Qingluo snorted and immediately turned her head away. Previously, you mentioned that you hated the gold men the most. But as far as I know, the White Lotus Society is not a righteous person who fights against the gold men. Moreover, you live in Gusu. Gusu has not been harmed by the gold army in recent years. So why do you hate the gold men so much? This was also the thing that Song Qingshu could not figure out. Logically, Li Qingluo and the Gold Kingdom had nothing to do with each other. So where did this deep hatred come from? Li Qingluo was expressionless and directly responded with silence. Then let's change the question. Song Qingshu did not mind. Earlier, why did you go to the bamboo forest to save the people from the Mount Hua sect? The Mount Hua sect's Yubuchuan prides himself on being a righteous sect, so he would never befriend anyone from the White Lotus cult. That's why I really can't figure out why you saved them. Song Qingshu suspected that Li Qingluo was related to Yu Fei's daughter, but he needed to confirm the exact situation with her. Li Qingluo pressed her lips together, still refusing to answer him. Song Qingshu smiled. It's fine even if you don't want to tell me, madam. At most, I'll just strip you naked and tie you to the city gate of Yangzhou City. I'll even write the White Lotus Mother and Gusamonto Villa's Madame Wang's beautiful body on the side. I'm sure the passers-by will be very happy to admire Madame's body. In less than 3 days, the news should reach Gusamonto Villa. Li Qingluo could not help but imagine that scene. When she thought of the countless men below the city gate glancing at every inch of her body with disgusting gazes, she could not help but shiver. Since you're afraid, then answer my question honestly. Song Qing-shu stared at her closely when he noticed her trembling unintentionally. After all, Li Qingluo was not an inexperienced girl. After her initial panic, a faint smile suddenly appeared at the corner of her lips. "I don't believe you'd actually do that." Song Qingshu frowned. "Why wouldn't I? If you really were such a vicious person, then I wouldn't still have half of my strength right now," Li Qingluo replied indifferently. Even as an enemy, she could not help but admit that he was someone who had tender feelings for the fairer sex. However, when she saw the bruises and red marks on her body, she immediately dismissed this thought. Song Qingshu could not help but be taken aback. Afterwards, he smiled and said, "That's right. I am indeed someone who has tender feelings for the fairer sex, but that's only for pure and kind women. I don't have that much patience for venomous beauties like you, madam." Li Qingluo sat up straight, exposing her beautiful body to him. As she tidied up the clothes scattered on the ground, she said, "The fiercer you speak, the softer your heart becomes." Song Qingshu's expression changed slightly. He studied her quietly and only said after quite a while, "You really are the white lotus mother after all, madam. Your wisdom and farsightedness are definitely not something a regular woman can possess." "Thank you for your praise." Li Qingluo picked up her clothes and discovered that they were all tattered. Clearly, they had been torn apart in an extremely rough manner. She could not help but blush. She could still vaguely remember what happened earlier. The person who had torn her clothes apart was not the man before her, but herself. "You win." Song Qingshu sighed. "I really can't do something like that, but I still have a way to deal with you." "What way?" Li Qingluo pulled the blanket over to cover her chest as she asked in an indifferent manner. "For example, channeling the true qi of joy into your body again." Song Qingshu extended a finger and smiled extremely strangely. Li Qingluo's expression changed, but she calmed down very quickly. Can you come again?" Song Qingshu's breathing stopped. He never thought she would be so tough. As soon as he thought about how he had been pestered by her for an entire night, he could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. "Even if I can't come again, can't I just find a few guards to come in?" Li Qingluo rolled her eyes at him in disdain. "Are you willing to do that?" Song Qingshu couldn't help gnashing his teeth in hatred when he saw her confident look. This woman was clearly an iceberg before, but he didn't expect her to have such a clear grasp of a man's mentality. That's right, he really couldn't do such a reckless thing. Suddenly, an idea flashed through his head. Song Qingshu smiled. "I really can't deal with you now, and I won't call other men over either. However, I can lock you up in the room alone after channeling the true qi of joy into you, so that you can have a taste of it again." Li Qingluo's expression finally changed. This was because, based on her experience and judgment, it was very likely that he would do such a thing. "I'll count to 3. If you don't speak by then, don't blame me for being rude." Song Qingshu knew the principle of striking the iron while it was hot. He did not give her any time to think at all. 1, 2. Song Qingshu had already walked in front of Li Qingluo and was about to poke her with his finger. At this moment, Li Qingluo finally spoke. "Yu Fei is my uncle. During the National Day, the monk brought the child back to his hometown. As Grandpa and Grandma never took care of him before, the main force of taking care of the child is still me. I can't leave from day to night, so I'm afraid that the updates for the next few days will be affected. Please forgive me, readers. Today's chapter was written while the child was napping and sleeping at night. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.